Dawn broke over King's Landing like a slow-healing wound, pale gold bleeding into the bruised purple that lingered above the city's half-rebuilt skyline. Marble dust drifted on the breeze from the stonecutter's yard, mingling with the sharper scent of charred timber that still clung to the gutted shells of houses left where dragonfire had raked the streets. Far below the Red Keep, hammers beat a steady cadence against broken walls, but the workman's rhythm could not banish the hush that claimed the heights. In that hush, a single raven circled the Tower of the Hand before banking south and vanishing toward the Blackwater, as though carrying away the last note of a forgotten song. The world, it seemed, was holding its breath, waiting for the long night of history to decide whether dawn truly meant a beginning, or merely the dimmest light before a darker storm. In the courtyard before Maegor's holdfast, fresh-laid flagstones gleamed with dew. Bran Stark felt their chill through the wheels of his oaken chair as he rolled forward, nodding to a pair of Unsullied, who snapped their spears into salute. He steered by pressure alone, fingers light on the carved rims, but the chair's shadow stretched long behind him, and in that shadow strode a giant of a man whose every step landed like a drum beat upon the stones. Hodor. Wylus, once, though few spoke that softer name now. The small folk whispered other titles: Bran's Oak, the gentle giant, the door made flesh, yet the king had never needed more than the single syllable that had defined the man since boyhood. Hodor stood as broad as a bull, shoulders wrapped in a simple boiled leather hauberk, too plain for court yet cleaner than any siege cloak. His hair was streaked with ash gray, but his eyes remained the clear, trusting blue Bran remembered from Winterfell's stables, and when they swept the courtyard, their vigilance was absolute. Sunlight picked out the faint puckering of pink scar tissue along Hodor's left temple, a relic of the cave beneath the weirwood roots, of that night when Bran's frantic cry had splintered through time. Somewhere beyond sight, Mira Reed still carried the arrow that knocked the string, and Summer's ghost howled in the frost. But Hodor lived. Maesters had argued it a miracle. Servants spread rumor of old gods and wild powers, and Sept and Eustace muttered of unfinished penance. Bran alone knew the truth. In the weave of ravens' wings and children's fists pounding on a wooden door, he had found a path that led the living giant back into the light. It had cost him something secret in the marrow of his mind. Another thread severed from the boy who once climbed broken towers. But when Hodor opened his eyes among the dead whites, bloodied yet breathing, Bran felt the world leak possibility again. Possibility had carried them south. Tyrion's letter, sealed with a broken chain, arrived as the snows above the neck began to thaw. His grace needs a shield great enough to discourage memory. The hand had written in his narrow, careful script. Bran had understood at once. Men would forget the horrors of a ruined crown only if presented with a gentler myth. What myth gentler than the giant who bore no sword but lifted a boy-king across ashes? So they came, Bran in a wagon drawn by surly northern garrons, Hodor walking beside as though every league were a single stride. They crossed the causeway, summer rain steaming on stone, and sailed from White Harbor on a cog called Storm's Mercy. When at last the gilded domes rose from haze, sailors crowded the rail, staring at Hodor with equal parts fear and wonder. He had waved, shy as a child. Now, weeks later, the hush of the Red Keep accepted him as naturally as ivy claiming masonry. A silver pin, the shape of a direwolf's head, fastened his cloak, a gift from Bran on the day the Lord sware fealty. Hodor touched it once, a reminder of purpose, before resuming his silent sweep of the battlements. Bran felt safe in that silence. No guardsman's footfalls, no rustle of half-drawn steel, only the slow exhale of a man large enough to block arrows with his chest, yet gentle enough to cradle a hatchling pigeon fallen from a nest, which he had done 2 mornings past. The pigeon now nested in a wicker basket near Hodor's sleeping pallet, cooing each dawn as if counting itself lucky to be under such protection. A court page hurried from the portcullis arch, boots skidding on damp stone. "Your Grace, the small council awaits in the Queen's ballroom. Sir Podrick says the hour is ripe to discuss the grain levy." His eyes flicked toward Hodor, widened, then darted away like minnows before a pike. Bran inclined his head. "Tell Sir Podrick we'll come presently." The boy sprinted off, relief spilling from his shoulders. Bran shifted his wheels and gestured toward the ramp. Hodor stepped behind and with practiced care, placed massive hands on the handles crafted for him alone. The chair rolled forward, silent on oiled axles, the giant guiding but never rushing. At the ramp's edge, Hodor paused, peered downward, as though gauging the slope's intent, then advanced at a pace measured to Bran's breath. They passed under vaults where dragon skulls once hung. Sunbeams carved through arrow slits, dust motes dancing. Each chamber still smelled faintly of wildfire, an acrid memory that refused to die. Bran wondered if odors carried in stone like stories carried in blood, each new layer settling atop the old until no hammer could break the strata apart. He brushed a finger over a flame-scored pillar. Somewhere deep, the stone was cool, untouched. Perhaps that was hope enough. At the heart of every ruin, something enduring waited to be found. The Queen's ballroom had never housed queens. A high ceiling ribbed with gilded arches sheltered a temporary council table where Tyrell marble met Dornish teak. A marriage of convenience, like so many since the war. Tyrion sat at its head, a quill behind his ear, already muttering figures to Samwell Tarly, who shuffled parchments with anxious hands. Ser Brienne stood sentinel at the door. She nodded at Bran, then, to his quiet satisfaction, inclined her helm to Hodor as equal-ranked guardian. The rest of the council offered polite smiles, though some stilled when Hodor ducked beneath the lintel. The doorframe quivered as his shoulder brushed ironwood. He murmured, "Hodor," in apology, and took position behind Bran's chair. Tyrion cleared his throat. "Majesty, if you'll indulge us, Sam insists our granaries can repel famine by winter, but only if the Riverlands release their levy on schedule. Lord Piper's letters are creative." Sam mopped his brow. Bran folded hands in his lap. He listened, to ledgers of barley, to shipping lanes patrolled by half-paid sell sails, to whispers of Dorne's new prince testing alliances with Volantis. Through it all he felt Hodor's nearness like a living rampart. Once, when debate swelled into bickering, a Lannister cousin from Lannisport rose too quickly, chair scraping, Hodor's gaze fixed upon the man, mild yet immovable. The cousin swallowed, retook his seat, and civility returned. By mid-morning, sunlight slanted across the ballroom floor, painting Tyrion's charts in amber stripes. The hand concluded, "So long as harvests hold and coin can persuade marish captains, King's Landing will not hunger." He exhaled as though loosing a crossbow string. Bran nodded approval. "Thank you, Lord Hand." He turned slightly. "Hodor." The giant stooped. Bran whispered, and Hodor's face lit with the slow dawn of comprehension. He lumbered to the dais' edge, scooped up 2 parchment rolls, and a stoppered inkpot forgotten by a courier, and delivered them to Sam without spilling a drop. Murmurs rippled. Bran smiled to himself. Gentle stories spread faster than edicts. Soon clerks would tell of the giant who handled ink like spun glass. The meeting dissolved into lesser chatter. Lords drifted toward balconies, hungry for air rather than alliances. Bran reversed his chair. Hodor guided him toward the colonnade overlooking Blackwater Bay. Wind tugged at Bran's sleeve. Below, scaffolds webbed the city walls. Cranes creaked as great stones swung into place. Slide barges ferried rubble to a man-made shoal that, decades hence, might become a new dockyard. For now it looked like a scar crusting at the edge of the water. Yet gulls glided above it, hopeful of fish churned by oars. "Life," Bran mused, "wastes no time filling voids." Hodor followed the king's gaze. Ships fascinated him. In White Harbor he had spent hours watching masts sway, as though each were a tree daring the sea to uproot it. Bran remembered asking if Hodor wished to sail farther, perhaps to Old Town, or even beyond the Sunset Sea. Hodor had smiled, broad as a barn door, and spoken the only word he owned. Somehow, Bran understood it to mean that wherever Bran rolled, there would Hodor walk, and nowhere else called him so strongly. A swallow dipped under the eaves. Something cold brushed Bran's mind, a ripple through weirwood roots stretching farther north in memory. He blinked, steadying. Visions came less often these days, tempered by duty, yet the trees whispered still. He tasted snow, distant, and heard a wolf's faint yip. Not summer, Another. Perhaps new packs roamed the Wolfswood. Part of him yearned to fly there in thought, but the ache of responsibility tethered him. He had chosen the living. Hodor crouched beside him, massive knees creaking. Hodor? Concern shaded the question. Bran reached and touched his forearm. Only the wind. Hodor's brows softened. Their quiet broke when Tyrion appeared, cloak flapping. "I trust you found the discourse riveting," he said, dry as parchment. "If not, allow me to sweeten the day. The kitchen's perfected honey pear tarts for luncheon." Hodor perked at the word honey. Tyrion's grin widened. "Ah, incentive. Would his grace join me in sampling the baker's diplomacy? The giant's appetite is formidable proof of quality control." Bran chuckled. "Lead on, Lord Hand." They navigated corridors where new tapestries masked soot stains. Tyrion regaled them with a story of a Braavosi guildmaster who tried to bribe him with green-eyed courtesans. Hodor laughed at each punchline, a basso rumble that vibrated chandeliers. Servants peered from alcoves, smiling despite themselves. In the royal kitchens, steam fogged rafters. The head cook, a wiry woman with flower-whitened hair, curtsied and presented a tray of tarts blistered to caramel perfection. Hodor's eyes widened like moons. Tyrion, ever theatrical, waved an approving hand. "Serve the king." A scullion offered Bran the first. Bran bit into pastry that melted like early snow on tongue. Cinnamon, pear, the faint bite of lemon. He closed his eyes to savor. A distant clang rang through stone. The gatehouse bell. Tyrion stiffened. Visitors, unexpected. Bran met his glance. Hodor rose, towering, hand drifting toward the cudgel slung across his back. Oak, banded in iron, carved with runes Osha once taught him. The cook edged aside. Tyrion dashed flour off his doublet. "Let us greet destiny." They emerged into the keep's entrance hall as the great doors groaned open. Beyond, 3 riders waited. Banners white as crusted salt. Sigil lost in shadow. City guards parted, uncertain. Hodor loomed behind Bran's chair, a mountain of resolve. The riders dismounted. The foremost, a woman clad in sea-green scale mail, helm tucked beneath her arm, stepped forward and knelt. Silver hair escaped her braid, glinting. "Your Grace," she said, accent slanting as though waves shaped her tongue. "I am Captain Lysa Tor of the Shield Isles. My ships bring a cargo you once lost to the deep." She lifted a carven chest, barnacles crusting its bronze bands. Curiosity rippled through the hall. Bran signaled Hodor, who took the chest as though it weighed no more than a loaf. The lid creaked open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a sword. Slender rippled steel blacker than onyx. "Dark sister." Bran inhaled. "Where did you find this?" Captain Tor's eyes shimmered. "On the seafloor off Dragonstone, tangled in kelp. Tide turns up old ghosts, it seems." Tyrion murmured. "The blade of Visenya Targaryen, lost since Maegor's reign." Whispers spread among onlookers, but Bran's attention drifted elsewhere. In the chest's corner lay a coiled length of leather, charred at one end, perhaps once a strap. Yet when Bran's fingers brushed it, the world shifted. He stood on a shore of black sand, storm clouds mirrored in pools between jagged rocks. Someone wept in the surf, a child clutching a broken harness. Bran tasted salt and sorrow not his own. Then, just as abruptly, the vision snapped. He was back in the entrance hall, Hodor's steady hand gripping his shoulder. Captain Tor bowed again. "I would place the sword in the king's keeping until a rightful bearer is named." Tyrion exhaled a slow breath. "The crown is grateful." Bran nodded, though his thoughts still echoed with the phantom shore. "You shall be rewarded. Tonight's feast will honor you." The captain smiled. Relief plain. As guards escorted her toward guest quarters, Bran whispered to Tyrion, "Send ravens to Old Town. Ask Archmaester Marwyn what power lingers in relics drowned and found." Tyrion arched a brow, but dipped his quill. Hodor closed the chest, lifted it with due reverence, and followed Bran toward the lift that would carry them to the upper solar. The lift was new, ropes fresh, a gift from Dorne's engineers to ease the king's passage. As they ascended, the city unfurled through slatted windows, sun now bright upon the bay. Gulls screamed. Somewhere a smith struck metal, the ring echoing a promise. Blades might break, yet hands would forge anew. In the solar, Bran asked Hodor to set the chest upon a maple table, polished till it reflected sky. Hodor did so, then waited. Bran felt the weight of the sword story pressing against his chest, an unspoken challenge. He spoke softly. "Hodor, I saw something when I touched the strap." Hodor frowned, concern etched deep. Bran reached, patted his arm. "Not danger, not yet. But ripples on the water grow into waves." Hodor pondered this, then nodded once, as if accepting clouds before rain. He moved to stand beside the window, silhouette cutting a perfect line between sun and shadow, and resumed his quiet watch. Bran's heart eased. Whatever waves might come, he would face them with this living bulwark at his flank. A wall of flesh and loyalty no storm could breach. Afternoon drifted past. Ravens arrived bearing replies to matters mundane: grain taxes, marriage petitions, border skirmishes among minor lords, hungry for the vacuum left by greater wars. Bran answered each in turn, quill steady. Tyrion returned with drafts of New Harbor tariffs. Sam delivered a treatise proving smallfolk literacy had doubled since the Citadel's traveling libraries began. Bran listened, judged, encouraged. Hodor fetched volumes from high shelves, his fingertips brushing spines more tenderly than most men handled babes. No book fell. At dusk, torches flared in corridor sconces. The feast awaited. Bran allowed servants to dress him in a doublet of midnight blue, stitched with silver threads. Hodor exchanged his leather for a dark surcoat bearing the direwolf sigil. The garment hung like a banner over his frame. When Bran wheeled before him, he reached to smooth a wrinkle at Hodor's collar. The giant flushed, murmured, "Hodor," in shy thanks. They entered the great hall together. Chandeliers glittered, reflecting candlelight upon polished shield bosses mounted on pillars, new emblems gifted by houses eager to stand in royal favor. Music swelled from a quartet of lutes and a single high harp. Conversations lilted under vaulted ceilings. Yet as Bran crossed the threshold, the hall quieted, and eyes fixed upon his guard. Some looked with awe, some unease, but none with scorn now that stories had spread. That Hodor had held a weirwood door against endless dead, that he could swing a tree trunk as men swung canes, that he spoke only one word, but understood all that hearts dared speak in silence. Captain Tor rose from the high table, wine in hand, and toasted the king. May the new age find its mirror in his grace, young yet wise, wounded yet unbowed. Cheers followed. Bran returned the toast with water to please the faith. Hodor lifted nothing, yet his presence alone was pledge enough. Courses arrived: river trout and lemon, roasted capons, spiced chickpeas imported from Korth. Hodor sampled each with polite restraint, though the kitchen had surely doubled every portion at the rumor of his appetite. Captain Tor recounted the perils of diving leagues off Dragonstone, her sailors battling sea hounds and night currents. Tyrion lifted his brow at the word night. Bran noted it, stored it beside the vision of the black shore. As the feast wound on, a troupe of mummers performed a comic skit lampooning Euron Greyjoy's self-crowned madness. Laughter bounced like thrown coins. Hodor's booming chuckle rose above, pure and unforced. Yet when one actor tripped near Bran's dais, Hodor's arm shot forward, steadying man and prop alike before they could crash into the king's chair. The hall gasped, then exploded in applause. The mummer, panting, bowed to Hodor as though to a knight of the realm. Hodor blushed crimson, repeating his namesake once, softly. Later, when dancers spun beneath colored lanterns, Bran requested his chair placed near the wall so he might watch. Hodor stood behind. Bran felt fatigue tugging at his limbs. The old dull ache of wounds soul deep, but he would not leave early. He sought joy where it bloomed, nurturing it like sap in spring. Across the floor, he spotted Brienne guiding a shy page through the first steps of a reel, patience personified. Beyond her, Sir Podrick laughed, half tipsy, as he collided gently with the Tyrell maiden. Life. Bran breathed it in. Midnight neared before Tyrion declared the feast closed. Guests departed, bellies full and tongues loosened with future tales. Bran retreated to his chambers, Hodor pushing the chair through corridors now hushed. Moonlight puddled on mosaic floors, silvering the direwolf tiles. When they reached the king's door, Hodor hesitated. Bran tilted his head. "You'll remain in the antechamber?" Hodor nodded. Bran squeezed his hand. "Rest when you can. Dream of green fields." Inside, Bran dismissed attendants, letting quiet claim the room. Yet sleep eluded him. Dark Sister lay in its chest near the hearth, and the drowned strap seemed to pulse with midnight. Bran wheeled closer, fingertips hovering. He felt the sea again, cold and relentless. A child's sob raked the wind. Boy or girl, he could not tell. He drew back. Not tonight. He turned to the window facing north. Stars glimmered above rooftops, patient fires guiding sailors and dreamers alike. Bran closed his eyes. Far off, wolves howled. He reached for their song, riding it like wind along the wall that was no more. Across frost-shrouded rivers, through tangled woods where white trees watched. In that distance he sensed something stirring, ancient as the first dawn, neither foe nor friend, but question. Whatever it was, it walked slowly, as though time itself bled at each footfall. Bran opened his eyes. He exhaled a long breath. Frost cool, though the hearth blazed. He did not fear, for between him and any shadow, a door yet stood, one forged not of wood or iron, but of a man's steadfast heart. Hodor waited beyond the threshold, listening through stone like a tree listening through root. Bran smiled into the night. The story would be long, as the old tales promised. And dawn was only the first page. K. PGSQL. Night turned within King's Landing like a sleepless animal, curling and uncurling beneath the roofs, while braziers guttered and wax puddled at the feet of iron sconces. In the antechamber, outside Bran's apartments, Hodor sat cross-legged on a woven rug far too small for him. Back-propped against a wall, where a newly hung tapestry of the faith militant sagged under its own damp weight. Moonlight pooled in the corridor, and in it the giant watched dust motes spin, counting them as though they were seeds blown from a dandelion, easy numbers that comforted a mind still scarred by doors held and futures folded. He dozed only in brief drifts, head dipping, then jerking awake at the faintest footfall, each time whispering his name in a low rumble, a private warding charm. Past midnight, the corridors settled, the hush thickened. But the hush did not reach the stairwell spiraling down to the keep cellars. From those depths rose a rhythmic scrape, iron on stone, too light for guards' patrols, too measured for rats. Hodor's senses pricked. He levered himself upright, cudgel in hand, and moved, slow to keep floorboards quiet, yet swift enough that candle flames bowed as he passed. He reached the stair's mouth. Cold drifted upward, smelling of damp lichen and rust. Hodor descended, boots whispering. Torches sputtered in sconces spaced wide. Between them darkness breathed like a lung. On the third landing he halted, listening. The scrape had ceased, replaced by a soft rush of cloth, and then a sigh. Defeated, perhaps pained, Hodor padded on. At the bottom lay an archway bricked half over after the conquest. Now the mortar was fresh broken. Beyond, candle glow fluttered. He ducked under the arch. A cloaked figure crouched before an open grate, tools scattered. A pry bar, a lock pick, a parchment smeared with charcoal diagrams. The grate itself, a heavy lattice that vented storeroom drafts, hung ajar, hinges squealing minutely in the draught. The intruder froze at the giant's shadow. Hodor planted his cudgel's iron-shod butt and rumbled. "Hodor!" The figure whirled, a knife flashing. But Hodor merely lifted one palm as wide as a helm, and the knife wavered, its wielder's courage evaporating like milk on coals. A girl, he saw now, scarcely older than 14, cheeks soot-smudged, brown hair hacked short for ease. Street sparrow. She looked from blade to giant's face and knew the odds. Slowly she sank to her knees, knife clattering. "Didn't know it were guarded," she whispered, words tumbling in a Gulltown lilt. Only wanted bread, sir. She touched fingertips to forehead in a pauper's salute. Hodor's brows knitted. He remembered winters in Winterfell when old Nan smuggled heels of crust to the kennels for pups skinny as rails. He pointed at the girl's satchel. Empty save a chipped tin cup, a tiny striker flint, a rag doll's button eyes sewn to cloth. No stolen gold, no map to secret rooms, only desperation. He lowered the cudgel. Hodor. His voice softened, coaxing. She watched, wary, yet when he extended a hand like a dock piling, she accepted and stood, swaying. Above, a guard's boot clanged. Hodor winced. The clamor would bring steel and questions. He gestured. Follow. Together they slipped upstairs, Hodor shielding her behind his bulk when torches approached. He led her through servants' corridors to the kitchen passage where braziers warmed chilled air with cinnamon and yeast. An aging scullion kept lonely vigil there, folding linen napkins. At Hodor's knock he started, but the giant's gentle plea, one word weighted with all the meaning he could give, washed the fear away. The scullion handed over a cloth bundle, 2 rolls, a wedge of cheese, a handful of candied nuts broken from dessert plates. The girl's eyes shone wet in the gloom. Hodor guided her to a side door that opened on the slope below Maidenvault Tower. Fog veiled the city, muffling clanks from distant forges. He crouched, placed the food in her satchel, and mimed the path to Flea Bottom's outer markets, where bakers sold day-old loaves cheap. She nodded fiercely, clutching the satchel. Before slipping into the mist, she pressed both palms to his forearm, a silent oath of gratitude, then was gone. Hodor watched until shadow swallowed her, then exhaled. His heart thudded still, the echo of a confrontation unfought. He returned to the antechamber, but sleep would not come. He sat listening for scrapes that might be blades rather than hunger. None returned. Dawn found Bran sleepless as well. The visions had thickened after Hodor left, swirling behind his eyes like dark ink in water. A black shore, the child's sob, and further now, a cracked mirror where 9 white ravens scratched at their cages. Each time Bran caught the edge of a symbol, 3 slashes curving like a serpent consuming its tail, it dissolved. He woke to pale light, and the faint scent of lavender the servants used to mask fireplace soot. When Hodor entered, Bran saw the fatigue in his guard's shoulders, and the faint smear of mortar dust across his boot. He asked nothing aloud. Instead he reached through what connected them, an echo of the old bond forged in cave darkness and blood. Hodor met his gaze, and let the memory pass. The starving girl, the unstolen treasures. Bran's chest tightened with pride. Words would cheapen it. He simply nodded. They began the day. The first council met in the solar where Dark Sister rested. Tyrion, Sam, Brienne, and several lesser lords clustered around a new map charting Guildhouse reconstruction. Captain Tor joined, salt dried on her boots, her presence invited by Bran for everything she dredged from ruin. The sword remained on a velvet runner, yet none touched it. The steel's smoky ripples seemed to drink candle glow, leaving wicks guttering. Discussion skated from coin to quarrel. Lord Serry of the Hook argued merchant levies favored Myrish traders over Stormlanders. Sam produced figures that disproved him, but Serry's temper flared. He slammed a fist near Bran's wheels. Hodor shifted, shadows folding around him. Serry felt them as a chill and backed off, stammering apologies. Tyrion quipped, "I find Data and Giants an unbeatable duo." Laughter bled tension. Bran steered matters toward the sword at last. Captain Tor says men diving with her heard bells beneath the water. Not ship's bells, tower bells. Sunken masonry. Archmaester Marwyn's letter declares Dragonstone's cliffs once calved entire forts during Maegor's reign. Perhaps Dark Sister sank with one such ruin. Tyrion drummed fingers. Ruins are fine, but why the leather strap? Bran told of the vision. The hall stilled. Brienne crossed arms. A child crying is omen ill. Captain Tor offered that storms at sea often left fishermen's children orphaned on islets. Ghosts followed the tide. No one liked how such ghosts might cling to relics. That night, Maester Dornio supervised 2 silent novices as they bore the chest to the rookery tower, sealing it in the high stone archive where Wildfire's schematics once hid. Ravens rustled in nearby cages, unsettled. Hodor watched the locking of iron latches. When the final bar slammed home, the ravens fell silent as tombstones. Days slid by. King's Landing breathed as though testing new lungs. Masons raised arches over Sparrow Square. Fishwives returned to shore markets, their shouts lacquered with brine. Children dared play near the Red Keep again, chasing hoops that clattered across repaired paving. Always the giant silhouette roamed terraces, as much a fixture as the towers. At first, some shrank from him, but the story of midnight bread spread on hedge-witch wings, and before a week ended a pair of urchins left an apple atop the stair for him. Red, polished against rag sleeves. Hodor accepted, splitting it to share with them until juice ran down their grins. Trust seeded. Yet beneath the trust, other roots coiled. From the north arrived a raven bearing a strip of pale fur tied to its leg. Direwolf, unmistakable. The message in careful, stark glyphs. Wolves ranging farther south. Packs displaced, game scarce beyond the last river. Maester Walken feared late frosts would choke pasture. Bran's fingers moved restlessly the day he read it. Summer seemed stunted now, winter a predator still circling. 3 evenings later, Bran dreamed. He flew over the neck, wings of no bird he knew, silent and silver. Marshlights blinked beneath, and in one he glimpsed Mira Reed's face shining with sweat and purpose as she hauled nets glistening with eels. He tried to call, but wind ripped his voice. Next, the dream plunged west, swooping across the sunset sea where black water frothed around a stone tower just breaching the surface. Bells within tolling. Dull, choking notes. A child in green rags clung to a parapet, crying against foam. On their wrist, the same charred strap. Lightning split clouds, and for a breath Bran saw sigils carved into the tower wall. 3 curved slashes. Then he woke, heart hammering. Hodor was there instantly, hand steadying Bran's shoulder, though no words had been spoken. Bran caught breath, eyes adjusting to pre-dawn gloom. "I saw the tower again," he whispered. Hodor's hand tightened. A long moment passed before Hodor, struggling beneath the cage of limited speech, offered, "Oh, Dor?" The syllable bent in questioning tone. Bran understood. "Where?" He shook his head. "Beyond charts, but I must know." At breakfast council, he relayed only the warning, a storm drawn by something in the deep. Tyrion's practical mind weighed superstition against security. He dispatched ravens to Driftmark, Pike, and Old Town, requesting all news of shifting shoals or uncanny wrecks. He also quietly ordered the city armorer to double the forging of steel-tipped ballista bolts. "For pirates," Tyrion told the smith, though his eyes hinted darker prey. Captain Tor lingered after the meeting. In a low voice redolent of brine, she confided to Bran that one of her divers had surfaced raving about a bell tower beneath a reef west of Dragonstone. He swore he'd heard a child's voice. The man dove again at dawn and never returned. Bubbles broke surface, tinged red. Tor thought it a shark until another diver later found the corpse. Throat slit clean, not ragged. Tor had kept that truth from her crew lest fear mutiny. Bran listened, blood cooling. He asked if she still possessed the diver's neck knife. She did. Bran requested it for study. 3 days later, the ship from Braavos arrived, the Sea Grace, carrying silks. And Marwyn Ser, the Archmaester, came unannounced, claiming curiosity. His black robe, heavy with occult sigils, drew wary bows from maesters and opened suspicion from septons. Bran welcomed him to a private audience. Marwyn examined the leather strap under magnifying crystal lenses. "Dragon skin cured in oil of nightshade," he pronounced, eyes alive. Older than Targaryen conquest. These 3 slashes, Valyrian glypha, stylized Kraken's arms maybe, but the angle, see here, they curl inward, as if binding, not grasping. "A ward?" Bran asked. "A ward against what?" Marwyn smiled the way wolves smile in high grass. "Against being found, your grace. And here it is in your hands." Namne. That evening, Bran insisted the sword and strap be moved again, deeper. Tyrion reminded him there was no deeper than the Rookery archives short of catacombs sealed since Maegor. Bran fixed him with all the weight of Greenseer's sight. Then we open what Maegor sealed. The tunnels below the Red Keep spiraled like a dead king's intestines, legend said. For years entrances remained barred, lest wildfire caches explode. Now Bran, Tyrion, Marwyn, Brienne and Hodor descended behind masons, ordered to breach the old mortared arch. Dust of generations choked lantern light. They passed chambers lined with rusted hooks, where lost bones clinked faintly. They passed a vaulted hall, whose floor mosaic depicted a dragon coiled around the sun. Sunbeams fashioned of mother of pearl, some pried out long ago by grave robbers. At last they reached a vault door of black steel chased with red enamel runes. Maegor's handiwork. 3 keys had once existed. Only one survived, hung in a lockbox warded by fire glyphs. Bran produced it, fingers steady though cold air bit at nerves. The key turned with a grinding reluctance. The door sighed open. Lantern flames recoiled as though sucked inward. Inside waited a narrow chamber, walls tiled in obsidian shards reflecting fractured light. At its center sat a stone plinth, and on that plinth, empty space, though the dust pattern suggested something long rectangular had lain there centuries. Marwyn hissed. Tyrion muttered a curse. The space could have fit Dark Sister precisely. Bran's spine prickled. Someone had removed it centuries before it was lost to sea. Or something had. Brienne's gauntlet brushed Hodor's elbow. She pointed. In a corner, half buried beneath volcanic ash, lay the busted hinge of a cage larger than a man. And beside it, the skeleton of a raven, beak fused shut with greenish glaze from dried wildfire. Bran felt a pulse behind his eyes. 9 white ravens, scratching. Cage broken. They stored sword and strap there, layering the plinth with fresh chalk sigils Marwyn drew, chanting in a tongue that tasted metallic on the ear. When they sealed the door, Bran sensed the chamber settle like a beast exhaling into sleep. Yet far above, ravens in the rookery shrieked at once, wings battering bars. Hodor flinched, instinct tugging him upward, protective. Bran whispered reassurance, though unease gnawed. That night, storms pressed against the walls. Thunder rattled panes. Rain clawed slate roofs. In Maegor's holdfast, Bran stared at curtains twisting in the draught while candles elongated into ghosts. He should have felt secure. Layers of stone, rings of guards, Hodor at his door. Yet visions bled through like ink beneath scraped parchment. Bell tolls underwater, a child's hollow sob, 9 white shapes winging around a broken mirror. Lightning flared, and in its afterglow Bran saw the mirror not of glass but ice, cracking inward as if something below hammered to escape. He rolled from bed, wheeled to the door, opened it. Hodor sat awake, cudgel across knees, eyes reflecting stormlight. Bran raised a finger to lips. Walk. Together they moved down corridors where torch flames shuddered. Bran's chair squeaked. Hodor slowed to dampen sound. They reached a terrace open to the elements. Rain stung Bran's cheeks, cold and cleansing. He gazed south where black clouds bruised the night. The sea answered. Lightning illuminated the horizon, and there, for an instant, a tower of stone rose on a wave, then vanished. Impossible distance folded like cloth. Bran's breath caught. Hodor saw only storm flash, but he felt the tremor in the boy king's frame and placed a steadying hand. Bran blinked rain from lashes. It's drawing nearer, he murmured. Hodor's grip firmed. Dawn broke on a city battered yet unbowed. Debris littered quay steps. Gulls shrieked around capsized skiffs. Repair crews marched with ropes and nails, unthinking now in their drill of survival. In the council solar, puddles pocked window ledges. Tyrion presented dispatches. Pirates massing around the stepstones, sails painted bone white. Whisper networks claimed a new corsair queen, Black Balandra, worshipped a drowned tower granting prophecies. Bran listened with sinking calm. He described his vision. Marwyn confirmed tales from sailors of a ghost spire surfacing in storm and vanishing. Only those of the faith of the drowned spoke of it openly, calling it the Mother's Bell. Some claimed its bells promised glory, if rung by living blood. Brienne volunteered to ride north and muster river knights for coastal watch. Tyrion approved, but Bran declined. River Run rebuilds its dikes. Stripping horses weakens them. He proposed instead that Captain Tor's flotilla survey waters between Driftmark and the Gullet, seeking signs of the tower. Hodor would accompany, Bran declared. Murmurs exploded. Shipboard duty for a giant seemed madness. Yet Bran's gaze brooked none. If the tower surfaces, we need more than swords. We need a door that will not break. Preparations consumed 2 days. The Storm's Mercy took on barrels, ballistae, and a steel-reinforced longboat modified to cradle Bran's chair. Sam pressed old atlas charts into Bran's satchel. Scribbles of reefs that shifted like fickle moods. Tyrion gave Bran a silver wineskin engraved with wolf and lion. For calm nerves, he joked, though his eyes burned with worry older than jokes. The morning of departure, small folk lined the docks despite drizzle. They cheered the king carried by giant arms down the gangplank. Hodor wore a new wool cloak, dyed midnight, direwolf clasp shining. The cheer swelled when he raised one massive fist in farewell. Children shouted blessings, tossing wilted olives, symbol of peace. Bran felt their faith like warm water on aching skin. Sea air cut clean, tasting of iron. The Mercy raced sail, crew scampering like squirrels along spars. Captain Tor barked orders, her voice a cracked bell softened by salt. Hodor crouched near the mainmast, ensuring Bran's chair was lashed secure. When at last land retreated to a smudge, the rolling rhythm settled. Bran closed eyes, senses opening wider. Gull cries, rope groan, heartbeats of 30 souls within wood walls. Beyond, deeper, the low hum of water around Hull, and further still, a pulse vast as moons, slow and inexorable. 3 days of uneasy calm followed. Tor plotted zigzagging search paths, entering eddies where kelp forested unseen ridges. Twice divers descended, returning with only starfish and stories of whisper currents tugging west. Hodor spent daylight hours braced near prow, scanning horizon. At dusk, he fed the ship's chickens, laughing when one bold hen tried roosting on his shoulder. Nights, he refused hammock comfort, insisting on sitting cross-legged beside Bran's bunk, back against Hull, the thrum of timbers resonating through him, as though he were part of keel. On the 4th dawn, fog thickened to muffle sails. Tor ordered half speed. Bran, awoken by sudden hush, felt cold drip down spine. He called Hodor, wheeled to deck. The fog scented not of brine, but of wet stone, chill like cave breath. Men murmured prayers. A bell rang, single note, though no bell existed on board. Hodor's head snapped left, eyes narrowing. Another clang, distant yet intimate, as if struck inside each skull. Fog thinned abruptly. Before them a tower rose from sea, black rock veined silver, barnacle crust thick as armor. It leaned, yet bells of dull bronze swung from arches, dripping water. Moss netted its upper ramparts. Hodor's breath left in a chuff. The tower's base disappeared beneath waves, but stone steps spiraled down into surf as though awaiting pilgrims. Captain Tor swore softly, ordering anchor drop. Chain rattled. Bran's heart hammered. "Launch the boat," he said. Tor hesitated. "Your grace, currents." Bran held her gaze. Hodor nodded once, decision made. Half the crew crossed themselves before lowering the longboat. Bran's chair was unlashed, placed mid-keel. Hodor climbed aboard, oar in each hand like spindles. 2 sailors joined, pale but resolute. Water lapped cold. As they neared the tower, the sea calmed unnatural, not a ripple jarred reflection. Hodor rode easy, muscle rolling under cloak. Bells above groaned, though no wind stirred. Close now, Bran saw glyphs carved into door lintels, 3 curved slashes. The same. The longboat bumped stone steps. Hodor shipped oars, lifted Bran in arms. His boots splashed, ascending slippery stairs. The sailors followed, blades drawn. The tower's door hung askew, internal wood rotten away. Beyond lay a corridor climbing upward, walls oozing algae. Hodor ducked, carrying Bran forward. The bells tolled again, deep vibrations through bone. At length they reached a circular chamber where crack-stained glass windows dripped light like drowned jewels. In its center, a dais held a bronze bowl crusted in verdigris. Around it were 9 stone perches, each with rusted manacles. Bones lay scattered. Ravens, Bran realized, whitened by salt. Hodor set Bran down gently. In the bowl sat a tangle of something dark. Leather? Bran leaned. It was many straps woven, each charred at one end. Hodor recoiled slightly, recognition stirring. Bran reached, fingers trembling, and touched. Vision exploded. He stood on this tower, but unruined. Dawn-lighting banners of silver and sea green. A woman in scaled armor knelt at the bowl, binding a child's hands with leather straps, while chanting Valerian Doctor. The child wept but did not resist. In another flash, sailors dragged crates labeled with 3 slashes into the chamber, and ravens croaked within. Then water slammed walls, tower tilting, and the woman screamed, "No crown but the Father below!" before wave engulfed all. Bran reeled back to present, gasping. The straps in the bowl smoldered faintly where his fingers lifted. Behind him, one sailor shrieked. Bran spun. From a side arch, figures emerged, men pale as drowning victims, eyes milky, hair hanging in kelp strands. Each bore knives carved of coral. They moved, silent as tides. Hodor stepped between them and Bran, cudgel raised. The sailors retreated, tripping. Bran shouted a warning to the Mercy, but knew sound would die inside fog. The drowned men advanced. Hodor roared, wordless for once, and swung. Wood and iron met coral with crack, sharp as splitting glaciers. One assailant's chest caved. Brine spilled instead of blood. Another slashed, blade skittering off Hodor's greaves. The giant hammered downward, shattering skull like driftwood. Yet more poured in. 6, 7. Hodor planted himself astride Bran, feet sliding on slime. Bran felt the tower's stones beneath him, remembered weirwood roots far away, and reached not through soil but through water. He called wolves, yet sea answered with leviathan silence. Desperate, he grasped Hodor's mind. Once it had been door and refuge. Now he lent vision, where each drowned man stepped, how tides shifted weight. Hodor moved like prophecy, intercepting blades before they rose, striking before eyes registered. He shattered arms, cracked knees, hurled bodies against walls, where they slithered down, lifeless. Still, 2 remained, circling. A bell overhead tolled, dust avalanching. At that resonance, the drowned men hissed and retreated down corridors, melting into gloom. Silence roared in their wake. The bowl straps no longer smoldered. They lay inert. Hodor's chest heaved, sweat mixing with seawater. Bran reached, grasping his hand. "You held the door again," he whispered, tears mingling with spray. Hodor looked at him, and in those blue eyes Bran saw no shadow of the cave, only steadfast presence. Hodor spoke, the word of vow and reassurance both. "Hodor." They did not linger. The sailors snatched relic straps, stuffing into oilcloth. Hodor scooped Bran, descended hastily, wary of pursuit. As they pushed longboat off steps, fog tore open. Behind, the tower's bells rang once more, but this time mournful, sinking tone. Bran glanced back in time to see the structure list. Stones crumbling like stale bread. Water swallowed its base. Bells gurgled. By the time they reached the Mercy, only surf boiled where tower had stood. A storm chased them northward. Crew hauled sail, decks awash in black rain. Among lightning forks, Bran watched the sea for resurfacing spires. None rose. Below deck, he and Captain Tor examined the recovered straps. Marwyn's eyes gleamed when he later saw them. "A binding circle," he murmured. 9 straps, 9 ravens, mirrors of power sealed away. He postulated a sect of ironborn sorcerers had once tried caging prophecy itself, using ravens as conduits. When Dark Sister later vanished, perhaps rogue acolytes stole it, intent on merging iron and omen. Bran suspected more. The tower, the straps, and the sword formed a triad, each calling the others across centuries. If so, depositing sword and strap in same vault might invite what pursued them. Tyrion, on their return, listened grimly, rubbing scarred nose. "We could catapult the lot into volcanic fires of Dragonmont," he suggested. Marwyn shook head. "Release of power worse than storage." Meanwhile, news from city gates. The starving girl had returned, now healthy-cheeked, guiding other orphans to soup lines established after Bran's decree. She spoke of the giant who bartered silence for bread, and from that tale grew a rumor of the Order of the Gentle Door, protectors of the wheat. Scribes recorded it. Singers spun it into ballad. Hodor remained oblivious, though he accepted shy thank yous with confusion. Autumn's edge settled. Bran convened a midnight council with Marwyn, Tyrion, Sam, Brienne, Captain Tor, and Hodor. They met in Maegor's vault, torches flaring against obsidian walls. On the plinth lay Dark Sister, the straps coiled beside. Bran proposed forging a new reliquary, a box of weirwood lined in dragonglass, sigils from North and Valyria entwined, sealed by ice and fire both. Marwyn believed such dual nature might neutralize resonance. Sam volunteered designs. Tyrion would fund dwarfsmiths from cohort. The vote, unanimous. Hodor placed one hand on sword pommel as if promising to keep watch until box ready. Obsidian reflections danced across his weathered knuckles like captive stars. Construction spanned weeks. Hungry eyes beyond the narrow sea watched. Letters warned of Black Balandra's fleet querying every port for tales of a bell tower and a giant guard. Riverland's merchants whispered of men with milky eyes buying coral knives. The storm had flung broken bodies onto Stepstone's beaches, drowned men with bones smashed. Their rags bore the 3/ sigil. One crisp night, as Bran rolled along garden terraces fragrant with last roses, he noticed Hodor staring northeast, where rooftops cut jagged shapes against rising moon. "You hear something?" Bran asked. Hodor's brow furrowed. He bent, ear close to ground like hunter reading hoofbeats. After a time he rose, lips curling around effort. "Door," he said. Second word distinct. Bran's heartbeat stilled. The first time Hodor had uttered something beyond namesake. "What door?" Bran asked softly. Hodor turned him toward the Red Keep's heart. Bran understood. The vault door. Something within stirred. They hurried, Bran's wheels rattling on flagstones. Guards accompanied, uneasy at Hodor's urgency. In the vault corridor, ravens perched on lintels, though none had been there ever. They cawed. Snow-white feathers ruffled. One flapped, dropping a single ice-bright quill at Hodor's feet. Bran commanded door unsealed. Keys turned. Lanterns revealed the plinth vibrating. Dark Sister's blade pulsed, faint glow crawling along ripples like moonlit tide. The straps writhed, ends curling. Hodor stepped forward, interposing his body. The ravens outside screamed. Bran reached with mind sense, and felt presence pressing from beyond mirror ice. The straps sought hosts. The blade sought hand. Bells sought blood to ring. Bran rallied will, imagining deep Winterfell roots winding cage-tight. He cast that net through Towerstone, anchoring around sword and leather. Hodor, sensing the vision, planted feet, lent his vast calm. Slowly the vibration eased. The glow dimmed, straps stilled. Ravens, as one, ceased their cries. When silence returned, Bran sagged in chair. Hodor knelt, hands gentle on wheel's rims. Tyrion soon arrived, breathless. Bran recounted. Tyrion rubbed temples. "We must finish that box yesterday." Marwyn redoubled Smith's hours, stoking forges through night. Within 6 days the reliquary stood complete. Pale weirwood shell, seams soldered with molten dragon glass, lids engraved with entwining slashes and direwolf. Bran and Hodor together placed sword and straps inside. Marwyn sealed wax runes along edge. Sam recited vow from the Night's Watch oaths. Brienne dropped an iron locks bar. The box thumped shut, and instant tranquility spread so profound even torches burned steadier. They buried the reliquary deep in the crypt foundations of Baelor's Sept ruins, beneath layers of lead and marble. When final stones slid into place, wind outside shifted. Raven flock lifting skyward like scattered ashes. Released or repelled, none could say. Life resumed its cautious rise. Bran instituted gleaning rites for the poor. The starving girl became first apprentice in a baker's guild, newly chartered. Sept and Eustace preached that giants could be angels in coarse skin. Brienne trained recruits for the city watch. Sam launched a scriptorium, copying texts into common tongue. Tyrion argued tariffs with Pentoshi envoys until laughter crowned compromise. Some evenings Bran and Hodor rolled the gardens, scent of sage and myrtle curling around lamplit paths. They spoke little. Words were not foundation of their bond. One twilight Bran asked, "Do you still hear the door?" Hodor considered, gaze resting on distant orange sky. He shook his head. Bran smiled. "Then we have time." He glanced at seedlings sprouting where dragon's fire once scarred earth. Time enough to grow. Hodor plucked one fragile shoot between thumb and forefinger, marveling at its softness. Then set it back, soil cupped protective. In that gesture, the giant safeguarding the fragile, Bran saw the shape of a kingdom being remade. Power bowed to gentleness, strength guarding hope. He wheeled on, Hodor falling in step. And though the path curved into gathering dusk, the lamps ahead promised light enduring, held by hands that would not let the door fall. PGSQL. Autumn's wan veil thinned across the capital, tracing spider silk frost upon roof slates each dawn, though the sun still climbed high enough to release rain-washed fragrances from gardens. Bran had ordered planted atop the gutted terraces of Maegor's Holdfast. Where wildfire once boiled, ivy now crept, and seedlings of hardy rosehips tangled with lavender and ghost grass. The streets below began to forget the scent of burning men. Children skidded across squares chasing hoops of bent cane, squealing whenever their wooden wheels clattered beneath the passing shadow of Bran's escort. For Hodor could no longer pace the city in obscurity. The stories had multiplied faster than sparrows on a warm gutter. Scribes singing for copper in taverns told of the gentle door who stood before drowning ghosts in a vanishing tower, of the giant who spared a starving thief and taught orphans to trust a king who could not walk. It was not the tale Bran would have written. He never cared for his own place in the songs. But the city needed a parable soft enough to hold. So Bran let the legend grow, while quietly ensuring the facts beneath it held truer still. Each 8th day, just after the bells of the great Sept ruins tolled matins, Bran ordered his chair rolled down the long sloping ramp newly laid across the eastern bastions. Hodor followed with a sack bursting. Fresh-baked barley loaves contributed by the Bakers' Guild, small sacks of dried apples from Riverland's merchants, and pine cones, waxed and trimmed for kindling. In Flea Bottom, where soot scraped every lungful of air and plague stories kept mothers awake, the king's arrival at the soup lines signaled an hour of reprieve. Bran blessed ailing children by listening, as old Nan had taught him that true blessing came from a full hearing. Hodor, meanwhile, ladled steaming broth until the last pot ran dry. If a fistfight sparked over the queue, his deep Hodor deflated tempers faster than a dozen city guards. On one such morning, Bran noticed the starving girl, clean-cheeked now, and no longer starving, standing a few paces back with 8 younger children in tow. She carried a wooden spoon like a scepter, her eyes bright beneath cropped hair. Bran beckoned. Millie, she shyly confessed her name. The crowned scribes had already dubbed her Dormouse in the songs. Bran asked if she would help serve next time. She nodded, yes, fiercely. Hodor grinned. A sunrise stretched across his face. By slow increments, trust threaded the capital. But beyond walls, tides shifted in darker silence. Letters arrived from the Stormlands. Fishing hamlets razed, hulls burned to keel. Survivors swearing raiders bore white sails spattered by something greenish that glimmered in moonlight. They chanted as they killed, a low drone like bell toll inside the skull. Lord Tarth's outriders found coral knives still clenched in corpses' hands, hilts pitted with brine as if carried straight from seafloor. High Septon in Old Town, or what remained, for the sept was still scaffolded, declared fasting days to ward off new leviathans of heresy. Sailors blamed Black Balandra, yet none had glimpsed her flagship. Only one description repeated: a woman 9 feet tall, hair the color of rotted kelp, eyes milk-clouded, walking the surf without sinking. Bran read each scroll by candlelight, fingers lacing the parchment's edges until wax droplets hardened against the desk. Tyrion paced, swore, crumpled a dispatch, and threw it at a tapestry depicting a young Rhaenyra Targaryen. Pirate queens are manageable. Sea spawn phantoms less so. He tugged his beard. We need eyes offshore. Eyes they recruited. Tor's flotilla doubled patrols, joined by 4 Braavosi triremes purchased at painful expense. Yet still charred hulks washed at Cape Wrath, sailors' bodies turned inside out with uncanny violence. Maester Marwyn studied them in clean stone mortuaries. Rasping incantations meant to coax memory from wounds. He found something stranger. Flakes of black scale embedded in muscle, like dragon scale but thinner, iridescent. When heated in brazier flames, the flakes writhed toward one another, arranging into trefoil curves, 3 slashes. Sam carried 1 flake to Bran wrapped in silk. Even folded in 8 layers, the package trembled. Bran opened it on a plain oak table, Hodor's watchful presence looming behind. The fragment lay still until Bran's fingertip brushed its edge. In an eye blink he stood underwater again, tower bells tolling. A woman's voice carried through the current. "Awake the deep door and the north shall drown." He tore back to the room, lungs genuinely gasping for air. Hodor steadied him. Sam's face had gone parchment white, and he fled to fetch water, stammering apologies. Bran closed the silk, ordered the flake sealed in dragonglass. Fear gnawed. The reliquary might be safe beneath rubble of Baelor's sept, yet something from the same forging pool still traveled in living flesh. Hey. Late in the moon of Maiden's Tears, Archmaester Ebrose himself arrived, bearing scrolls stitched in red thread, the Citadel's mark of consensus. Ebrose, brittle but sharp-eyed, announced that auguries of comet tails projected a conjunction, due within half a year, 3 heavenly bodies crossing, portending upheaval by land and sea. Marwyn scoffed at the Citadel's sudden faith in celestial omens, but admitted the trajectory might stir deep currents. "If we cannot slay prophecy," Tyrion quipped during council, "perhaps we can bribe it." Yet his jest fell flat when Raven Master Luwin reported that the white ravens had not returned to normal roosting patterns since that night in the vault. Some perched on the Narrow's lighthouse towers, others nested in abandoned sept steeples, watching the water silently. Bran's dreams worsened. He no longer saw only the bell tower. Now it lay half-submerged off King's Landing's own breakwater, bells ringing though drowned. Children played on the beach, blissfully deaf until the bells tolled thrice. Then their eyes clouded white, and they walked into the surf. He woke with a scream trapped in his throat, cold sweat soaking sheets. When Hodor rushed in, Bran pressed his forehead to the giant's calloused palm, seeking the anchor of the present. Only the scrape of ravens beyond the shutters answered. Maester Dorneos suggested dreamless sleep draughts, drowsy poppy tinctures. Bran refused. Dreams were warnings. He must remain witness. Instead, he asked Tyrion to reopen the Quadrivium Spire, an abandoned tower of alchemists where glass astrolabes had once charted stars. If conjunction approached, Bran meant to watch it himself. Nak'tai. The spire's restoration took a moose turn. Carpenters replaced rotten stairs. Mirror-polished bronze lenses arrived from Loreth. Sam supervised copying of ancient sky charts onto fresh vellum. Hodor carried crates of crystal spheres up 8 flights without complaint, though the spiral steps protested under his weight. Each night, Bran rose through the new lift cage, designed for his chair, emerging on the topmost platform where breeze sang through remnant arrow slits. He charted stars with charcoal on parchment, affixed to a drawing board cushioned by wool so his cramped fingers could trace every arc without splintering pain. On the 23rd night, the first wandering star shifted hue, deepening from lambent pearl to bruised violet. Bran marked it, heart quickening. 2 more nights and second star followed suit. On the third, clouds devoured the sky, thunder muttering until dawn's washed amber. The crowds below hardly noticed. Harvest wagons still rolled, and tavern windows sputtered yellow laughter. Yet in the spire Bran watched violet lights weave behind clouds, flickering like pulse beneath skin. Hodor sensed his restlessness. At dusk he stood by Bran, eyes narrowed on the hazed horizon. When Bran attempted to soothe him, Hodor surprised him with a quiet statement. Not just a single word, but a sentence built slow and heavy like stones placed one on another. "Cold door come." Then silence, as if effort drained him. Bran blinked, throat constricting. To force more would risk fracturing the fragile bridge. Bran merely squeezed Hodor's hand. That handshake decided Bran. If prophecy had chosen his friend to speak again, it would do so whether he hid or fought. He must meet it on ground of his own choosing. Winter's first sleet scratched high windows when ravens shrieked across the sky like torn paper. Bran wheeled before the vault door at mid-morning, flanked by Hodor, Brienne, Marwyn, Sam, and Sir Podrick Catgut. Tyrion waited further back, arms folded, his expression a mask of sardonic patience over pooled dread. The weirwood dragonglass reliquary slept beneath layers of marble, lead, and basalt. Yet echoes reached Bran's dreams. Echoes that now manifested in the city, a new cult roaming night streets, faces painted with trefoil slashes, long knives of coral. Under sleeves, the gold cloaks had arrested 12 chanting beside the Blackwater, bloodletting into waves. If their worship sought unity of sword, strap, and drowned tower, Bran must ensure unity remained locked away forever. Marwyn spoke of a ritual of sealing. Weirwood resin mixed with dragonfire slag poured over relics as molten shield. But the forge for such mixture lay in Dragonstone's belly, and to melt the resin they would need dragon flame or its equal. Drogon haunted the east. The crown possessed no dragon. Tyrion suggested wildfire. Marwyn snarled that wildfire was capricious, more likely to split ceiling than strengthen it. Bran thought of Hodor holding doors against the dead. Doors. Strength. In simplicity. They excavated quarry-cut sandstone from beneath the crypt where reliquary lay. Masons carved a new enclosure, as thick-walled as any vault Ostium the Builder conceived. No hinges, no latch, only a slot through which the reliquary might slide before the cavity was filled with fused basalt and obsidian shards. Once sealed, the relic would be entombed beyond retrieval. Even Bran accepted he would never touch sword or straps again. The notion brought relief laced with sorrow. He had wanted once to wield a sword, to ride as brother among knights. Some child's echo still longed to trace Dark Sister's black ripples. But kingship had made him realist. Better an unhealed ache than an unleashed cataclysm. Constructing the final tomb required 4 weeks. They disguised the entrance as extension of the city aqueduct. With work noise constant, so spies learned nothing from echo. Millie and her orphans ferried brick scraps in barrows. Their involvement ironic camouflage? Who would suspect a warren of ragtag children of guarding arcana? As completion neared, so did omens. Merchants arriving from Pentos spoke of entire islands and the stepstones sheared clean of soil. Bedrock polished like glass, as if a wave tall as cliffs had licked them. A Mirish captain presented Tyrion a map charred at edges. Currents redrawn, swirling around a point marked by 3 intersecting lines. Captains swore a void yawned there, gulping ships without wreckage. Sailors who skirted it reported dreams of bells ringing through their hulls. One night, Millie burst into Bran's solar, half weeping, half furious. The city watch found 3 of her littlest companions drowned near the mudgate, water still dribbling from nostrils, though lungs bore no fluid. Ravens perched nearby staring. On each child's wrist, someone had wrapped a strip of seaweed knotted thrice. Bran wheeled into the corridor shaking with icy rage, so fierce guards stepped aside, as though sensing frost bite their ankles. Tyrion trailed, voice hushed but urgent. "We cannot let grief tip you into rashness, your grace." Bran's eyes remained fixed ahead. "Grief is the stern of the boat, Lord Tyrion. It keeps the bow pointing true. Hodor kept pace silent, his great fists clenching. That same night, Bran posted edict. Curfew from dusk to dawn. Triple guard on seaward walls, torches relit every 30 steps. The master armorer forged windlasses capable of hurling flaming bolts half a league. Atop the spires, Sam and Maester Ebros tracked the violet stars. They now traced spirals around the zenith, converging like petals closing. Conjunction days away. It arrived beneath a moonless sky, windless and weighty as stone. Distant thunder over open water hammered steady, yet no lightning split the clouds. Bran stood upon the ramparts wearing a cloak of brushed wolf fur. Frost limned the parapet, sizzling where torch drips struck. Hodor loomed at his side, cudgel tip resting on flagstone. Below, the bay heaved in eerie stillness, no whitecaps breaking. Tyrion, swaddled in layered velvet, popped from the stairwell, cursing the chill. "I hate portents," he muttered. Marwyn followed, wielding an hourglass, Brienne scanning horizon through a Myrish spyglass. Sam clutched leather-bound notebooks and shivered, though he wore 2 cloaks. The first boom came from the south, deep like a smith striking mountain. The water far out belched upward, forming a dome lit from beneath by ghost-green luminescence. Torches along the wall flickered, color draining until only green flame remained. Bran gripped wheel rims. The rims felt wet, though no rain fell. The dome collapsed inward, revealing a maw of blacker water. Up rose the tower, larger than before, whole sections heretofore unseen, barnacles flaking off like scales from a molting serpent. The bells tolled thrice, each peal driving invisible nails into eardrums. Guards cried out, some fell to knees, helmets ringing like bowls. Bran's own head swam, but he stared unblinking. Atop the tower a figure emerged. Woman shape, elongated, arms spread as wings. Milk-white hair streamed, though no wind blew. Slitted eyes glowed sea green. In one hand, she held a sword not unlike Dark Sister but jagged, edges serrated like shark's teeth. In the other, a woven braid of charred leather straps, identical to those sealed. She raised both, and bells thundered again. The bay churned, dead bodies surfacing, eyes blank, mouths chanting in perfect unison though throats were slashed. They strode across water as if it were glass. Hundreds. Coral knives glinted. Arrows loosed by wall archers pierced some, but bodies continued forward, bloodless, tireless. An arrow struck the tower woman's chest and splintered mid-flight into brine. Wildfire. Tyrion gasped. Marwyn shook his head. Would feed her, not burn her. Bran's dreams collapsed into now. He understood the broken mirror. Reality thinning. If the woman reached the city, bells would ring within living skulls. All doors would open. He wheeled to Hodor. The giant looked down, awaiting command. "Hold," Bran said. Hodor strode to the rampart's edge, hoisted Bran onto battlement, where he could see unimpeded. The horde's chant rolled nearer. Low, many-throated. Bran closed eyes, searching for threads of life in the bodies. They felt like cold cinders. Not whites, not living, puppets of drowned will. He reached deeper, underwater roots, weirwood memory eroded by salt. There, a thin cord stretched from every puppet to the woman's outstretched arm, threads woven of the same black scale Sam had shown him. Cut the braids and puppets would fall, yet no mortal arrow would penetrate. Bran's mind soared into the body of a gull riding thermals overhead. Through gull eyes, he spied fissures in the tower stones, glowing green. He glimpsed below the surface a chasm sucking water, feeding energy upward. The tower was not built on seabed. It grew from a wound. Bran returned to his body, gasping. "We must sink the tower," he told Tyrion. "Not with fire. Stone against stone. Collapse the wound." No. Catapult stones won't reach Middle Bay," Brienne protested. "But the chain will," Bran replied. Tyrion's eyes widened. Rhaegar's chain, an immense harbor chain forged long ago and hidden in tunnels, meant to block Blackwater Bay. It had been half dismantled after Stannis' siege, but links still coiled in the belly of the city. Orders flew. Gold cloaks swarmed tunnels, unbolting rusted hooks. Teams of draft horses hauled the chain, link by link, onto iron rollers that groaned across the dock's new timber. Hodor joined, muscles bunching as he heaved chain lengths thick as a man's waist. Bran's forces anchored ballista ropes to chain ends. The plan was mad. Loop the chain around base of tower, then lever it sideways, using tidal surge as ally. Tor's ships volunteered, steering out laden with chain, but waves battered hulls, threatening capsize. Hodor stepped forward, not waiting for counsel, and waded into the bay. Water reached his thighs, waist, chest, but he pushed onward, holding an end of chain slung across one shoulder. Sailors leapt over gunwales to lighten loads. Swimming behind, Bran watched, heart clawing ribs. When water reached Hodor's chin, he raised the chain overhead, still advancing, the line spiraling after like a steel serpent. Drowned puppets turned toward him, but Hodor swung the chain like a flail, smashing 3 into shards of bone and scale. He trudged, unstoppable, every step forging path for the sailors, now dragging coil behind. The woman atop tower tilted her serrated blade downward. A gout of green lightning spat into sea, striking near Hodor. Steam hissed, water boiled. Hodor stumbled, yet kept hold. From parapet, Bran could do nothing but witness. He tasted sea brine on wind, though lips were dry. Sam muttered prayers. Marwyn whispered counterspells. Hodor reached the tower dais, looped the chain once, twice, metal clanging on stone. Sailors guided slack around far side, circling until links weighed like the world. Then the tide proved its loyalty. A larger swell surged inward, pushing tower and chain. On Bran's rampart teams hauled opposite end through capstans anchored in bedrock outguide. Tyrion shouted cadence, voice breaking. Sparks flew as metal scraped. The woman shrieked, unnatural pitch splitting air. Bells clanged out of time, echoes shattering nearby windows. White ravens burst from city keep, sweeping overhead in a cyclone. Bran felt the chain draw taut, vibrations humming through stone into his bones. Hodor braced both hands on links, feet planted on barnacled stairs, and pulled. For one breath, nothing yielded. In the second breath, cracks snaked across tower base. Third breath, the wound beneath water gaped wider, exhaling oily bubbles. The tower listed. Puppets ceased chant, wavering as their cords twanged. Fourth breath. Chain links groaned, and with a roar like glacier calving, the tower split. Upper ramparts sheared away, bells dropping, smashing into waves. The woman screamed again, but as tower fell sideways, chain cinching, she toppled with it, blade slicing nothing but spray. A final bell note sounded, no more than a dull cough, and stone disappeared beneath frothing black. The cords snapped, puppets collapsed, shells of scale breaking apart. Silence sucked the bay. Hodor remained standing knee-deep amid whirlpool, chains slack across his shoulders. Bran's cry of relief mingled with cheers skirling from walls and streets. Sparks of green fire flickered atop swells, then hissed out. The sea breathed, as if freed from a great weight. Torches rekindled amber. The night sky cleared to reveal violet stars parted like petals spent. The conjunction had passed. Hodor slogged to shore. Bran wheeled down ramp to meet him. Salt water dripped from the giant's hair, his face split by a weary smile. Bran raised a hand. Hodor knelt, allowing Bran to place palm upon his brow. Door held, Bran whispered. Hodor's eyes, clear as Windflower Lake in spring, brimmed. He whispered back. New word. Third spoken beyond his name. Safe. The city erupted in celebration, but Bran ordered vigilance. Chains were recoiled, unrested watch set. Marwyn collected scale fragments for study. The reliquary remained sealed. No tremor disturbed tombstones. For 3 suns, small folk danced in alleys, and bakers shaped loaves like tiny bell towers only to slice them into crumbs. Millie's soup line served extra meat, her authority unquestioned. Tyrion celebrated with vintage arbor gold, until hangover made him swear off prophecy for a month. Yet in quiet of dawn 4th day, Bran woke from dreamless sleep to find Hodor seated at window, gaze distant north. Bran rolled close. Hodor exhaled, breath clouding morning air though hearth glowed. He did not speak, but Bran felt it as certainly as he felt stone beneath. Some echoes carried still. The tower's wound had been closed, yet wounds heal with scars, and scars sometimes itch when storms gather. Bran placed a blanket around Hodor's broad shoulders. Together they watched sunrise gild rooftops, copper chasing silhouettes of freshly repaired domes. Bells rang ordinary calls for market day. Normal, human, imperfect. Each chime reminded Bran of doors that might yet be built. Doors that needed no heroes to hold them. Only steady hands to open at dawn and shut at night, keeping hearth fires in and storms out. He thought of Mira Reed casting nets in greenlight marshes, of Arya whose sword feet trod distant roads, of Jon somewhere beyond the shivering sea perhaps, of Sam's newborn daughter who would know only stories of winter. Bran's rain, he realized, would always carry taste of frost and salt, but that did not make the bread bitter. It made survival sweeter. Below, in the courtyard, masons hammered the first cornerstone of a new orphanage funded by fines levied on piratical guilds. The orphanage bore an emblem carved after Bran's own design. A stylized door of weirwood, barred by an oak branch, flanked by gentle wolves. Hodor would lay final stone when walls reached height of his shoulder. The sun climbed. A raven landed on parapet, not white but coal-black, eyes ink-bright. It cawed once, hopped, and flew. Bran followed its arc until it vanished. Then he turned to Hodor, and they shared a quiet unlike any other, rooted not in fear or duty, but in simple continuation. The long night had ceased today, and doors once barred now opened to life's plain, ordinary music. Hammers, gulls, laughter, wind. There would be more stories. The world was seldom still. Yet for this breathing space, the king and his guard, the boy and his giant, sat beneath tilting sunlight and allowed themselves the unburnished gift of peace. Kshain K.A. Sql. The sun skimmed low over King's Landing's rooftops, as if reluctant to let go of the rebuilt skyline, sharpening each copper dome and slate spire into a blade of light before easing westward in a slow burnished descent. Its warmth breathed across terrace gardens, where thornless roses bowed, releasing a fragrance that settled like silk over the courtyards below. Despite the hush of near-winter evening, the city's heart pulsed with industry. Smiths quenched final blades in troughs that spat hissing steam. Coopers tapped staves snug. Parchmenters scraped vellum thin and white for the Royal Scriptorium's ever-hungry presses. With the tower gone and sea lanes safer, merchants had poured back through King's Landing's gates, their argosy of voices lifting skyward. Life, as Bran so often observed, wasted no time filling a void. Yet peace is not simply the absence of war. It is a fragile edifice that demands constant tending, like those rose vines cradling the northern facade of Maegor's holdfast. Bran knew every blossom by scent now, having rolled among them each dawn with Hodor at his side. He had named the pale pink variety Ghostwind for its hardy resilience against salt gusts. Hodor named the deepest crimson One Hold, because its thick petals folded over themselves as if bracing. The gardeners smiled whenever the giant stooped, earth-stained fingers dwarfing the shears, trimming deadheads with soft precision. On this particular evening, after approving crop rotation parchments and debating harbor tariffs with Tyrion, until both men's tongues felt scraped raw, Bran guided his chair along the ramp overlooking the new orphanage's courtyard. Stone masons had set the final lintel 2 days earlier. Yesterday, Millie and her brood dragged straw pallets through echoing halls, staking out corners like conquering kings. Now lanterns glowed warm inside each arch, and a faint hum of lullabies drifted into the crisp air. Blending with the clank of the city's life, Bran exhaled, shoulders easing beneath wolf fur mantle. He did not expect serenity to last forever, but evenings such as this, where the world's iron ring momentarily loosened, were worth engraving in memory. Hodor lumbered a step behind, cudgel slung over one shoulder, other hand balancing a wicker basket from which rose the timid chirp of the pigeon he had once rescued. The bird was nearly full-grown now, wing feathers gleaming opalescent in torchfire. It seemed content to ride along, head tucked beneath its wing each time Hodor's stride jostled the basket. Bran had teased that the bird possessed either supreme bravery or supreme trust. Hodor replied with a single Hodor, shaded by unmistakable pride. They reached the parapet that looked east across Blackwater Bay. In daylight, the water lay glass blue, mended by gentle currents after the chain's battle. But when dusk fell, the surface caught the sky's dying ember and turned molten gold. Bran paused to watch the transformation. Ships anchored in the outer roads rocked under the slow swell, rigging chiming soft. A gull glided by, broke formation, and landed on the parapet only an arm length from Bran. It cocked its head, intelligent, unafraid. For a heartbeat, Bran felt a tug in his chest, an invitation to slip behind its eyes and soar. He resisted. Not tonight. Let the bird be free of borrowed vision. You'll freeze, Majesty, Tyrion said behind them, voice muffled by a heavy cloak too large for his slight frame. He joined the pair, resting forearms on the stone. His breath smoked. Stargazing so near the winter solstice is a sign of either devotion or madness. Which have we? Bran smiled. Both, if history is our tutor. Tyrion snorted. I've sent ravens to every port, cried our victory over sea phantoms. Yet gilded words do little to calm investors who lost cargo to a ghost tide. They want assurances the door stays closed. Proof, not promises. He eyed Hodor's cudgel. We cannot chain the giant at every quay. Bran's gaze traced the horizon where tiny lantern sparks, fishing smacks, speckled darkening water. The door they worry about is not in the sea, he said. It's here. He tapped the stone wall. And here. His hand drifted to his own chest. Fear itself is a gateway. We'll keep it bolted with trade, schooling, duties honored. Let them see the harbor bustle. Venture. Tyrion sighed. I'll carve that into the next edict. Very well. The Mirish delegation arrives in 3 days. They want a spectacle. Something to rival Pento's fire festival. If dragons are inconveniently absent, perhaps you'd consider a night illumination of the Blackwater. Floats bearing colored torches. I can have the alchemists produce blue flame if... No wildfire, Bran cut in gently. Tyrion raised hands. Torch oil only. I've no wish to bathe the bay in funeral pyre. He eyed Bran sideways. Could I ask the door to officiate? Hodor's gaze flicked up, puzzled. Bran answered for him. We fight by fighting, not by dancing. Then, seeing Tyrion's crestfallen expression, Bran relented. Though a parade of lights could remind folk that night can shine too. Let the orphanage children lead lantern boats. Hodor will steer one. That will be enough of a spectacle. Tyrion brightened, bowed, and scuttled off like a fur-clad crab toward the council stair. Alone once more, Bran pressed palms into the rim of his chair. Hodor set basket down, leaned large arms on parapet. Wind lifted curls from his brow. Bran studied him. His steadfast posture, the faint bruise still shading one temple from hauling the massive harbor chain, the patient eyes reflecting starlight. Door held. Bran echoed in a whisper. Hodor tilted his head. Safe, he said. The second word learned. Bran's throat tightened anew. They lingered until first proper stars twinkled. Bran named them softly. The swan's wing, the hunter's collar, the stranger's veil. While Hodor listened. Then they turned, heading inside. Every torch they passed dissolved the sky's hush, returning them to corridors scented with beeswax and parchment, to mortal tasks waiting atop Bran's desk. Yet the map of stars remained etched behind Bran's eyes. He carried it with him like a lantern into the long night corridors of waking duty. Ona. Casual. 3 mornings later, the Mirish delegation proceeded on. Their flagship, the Apiral of Lissing, a sleek caravel with silvered hull, glided beneath rising mist. Dockworkers paused, awed by sails dyed gradient midnight to dawn, and embellished with silk constellations. Rumor said the sails were coated with alchemical designs, catching certain winds as if charmed. Bran observed their arrival from a tower slit, noting the courtesy flags. Half-mast, weapons sheathed, trumpets silent. A cautious envoy. Good. In the throne room later, Bran received them. Lord Mikaros Chorus. A merchant prince draped in somber gray, flanked by scribes wearing veils as faint as cobweb. Mikaros bowed, presenting a casket of bluish pearls, harvested from the sighs of summer, which Tyrion later assured Bran was a lagoon notorious for smugglers, but nonetheless yielded fine gems. Mikaros spoke of mutual benefit. Mirror's glass artisans could supply window panes for the capital's rebuilding. In return, they sought exclusive rights to Blackwater River shipping lanes. Tyrion proposed partial rights, citing risk of monopoly. Mikaros' mouth tensed. Bran noted it, steered conversation towards stability. Trade thrives where horror abates, he said. You heard of what rose from our bay. We subdued it at great cost. Our watch continues, but neighbors' vigilance strengthens our shield. He folded hands. Mir will have dock space at half tariff for 3 years. In exchange, you supply the capital not only with glass, but with ships, 10 galleys for coastal patrol. Crew jointly. Mikaros hesitated. Such a levy reeked of tribute. But Bran leaned forward. Your glass floats unbroken if waters stay calm. Help us keep them so. The merchant prince at last bowed again. Agreement writ. Sealed. When the delegation departed, Tyrion wiped his brow. Impossible, he muttered, and yet you make it routine. You barter security like a baker trades loaves. He chuckled. Perhaps because, to you, each handshake is truly bread for the hungry. Bran smiled wearily. Every trade is a door. 2 sides meet in the frame. Keep it from slamming. Hodor, who had listened in silence at Bran's rear, murmured, Door. The word now comfortable as a warm glove. Tyrion grinned. The wisest commentary yet. That evening the Lanterntide Festival unfurled. Hundreds of torchlit skiffs ringed the harbor, each carrying a child bearing a colored lantern. Azure for hope, crimson for courage, gold for memory. Hodor's barge, large enough to host 3 dozen orphans, anchored at procession's center. Bran sat beside him, wrapped in thick sable. Nilly knelt between them, balancing a lantern painted with wolves courting roses. She lit its flame, then together with Hodor lowered it over the water where it drifted, casting ripples of auburn. Bells rang from the city's towers. Normal bells, warm, human. On shore, gathered crowds cheered, a low rollicking thunder that reverberated across stone. Musicians posted along the quay, chimed lutes, flutes, and casements to weave a tapestry of sound above lapping waves. As the skiffs glided, lanterns bobbing, Bran closed his eyes. The water's pulse mirrored the blood coursing through his veins. Strong, measured. No sinister undertow gnawed at hull. No bells beyond human forging tolled. He let his thoughts drift to Winterfell, to quiet lakes iced by first frosts. Somewhere ghosts of dire wolves still howled. But they howled in memory, not warning. Hodor's hand tapped the skiff rail, a gentle rhythm. When Bran opened his eyes, he found the giant watching him, expression parted by wonder. Pretty, Hodor said. 3rd new word, and Millie's face lit brighter than her lantern. She repeated it, nodding. Even the orphans chorused, pretty. Bran laughed, the sound catching in his throat like wind chimes tugged by a sudden breeze. Lanterns formed an ever-widening circle, their pooled light reflecting starlight above. For the first time in many months, Bran felt the wheel of his chair anchored to more than stone. It felt rooted in promise. Now, Hall. The next moon waned in relative calm. Grain ships arrived from the Reach, sending prices tumbling. Small folk ate hot oatcakes rather than thin gruel. The scriptorium's presses produced penny chapbooks, adventure tales starring the great Hodor rescuing kitten-sized dragons from unscrupulous pirates. Even Dower Brienne chuckled at their fanciful covers. Cynics claimed such stories were royal propaganda, but they purchased them anyway for their children, and laughter softened as pages turned. Yet vigilance never dozed entirely. Scouts on Cape Outcropping spotted strange slick patches, sheens that glowed faintly night green. A brazier tender at the signal tower reported hearing bell tones carried on fog, but dismissed them as clanging mooring chains. Maester Dorneos charted these sightings and found they traced a spiral around the bay's mouth, as if encircling but not breaching. They puzzled over it for a fortnight. Marwyn posited a last residue of the tower's enchantment dissipating in eddies. Bran hoped so. During that interval, Hodor began speaking in shards of phrases. Not whole sentences, but two-word combinations. "Bright day bread, bread good bird home," whispered shyly to Bran or Millie. No other witnesses, as though speech itself remained fragile glass best handled in private. Bran encouraged, responding with equal brevity. They taught each other silent conversation too. A tap on elbow meant, "behind you." A thumb tracing circle on knee meant, "quiet danger." Their code grew until they could communicate half a page of meaning without sound. Tyrion jested that soon Hodor's legend would outstrip knights famed for eloquence. Beneath the gain, Bran detected a latticework of neural healing inside Hodor's mind. A rewiring perhaps born of the giant's close brush with old magic. It did not erase the fracture he had suffered when Bran once forged through time, but it built bridges around it, connecting islands of memory once maroon. Each new word sparked across synapses like torches along nighttime ramparts. Bran monitored, careful to support without pushing. Progress must be his friend's choice, not the king's command. Uli, Doc Ray. Winter's teeth sank halfway into the realm before the next shadow surfaced. Not from the sea, but from the west. A raven from Casterly Rock bore grave news. Clusters of sheep found turned inside out. Wool tied into knots shaped like the 3/ sigil. The killings occurred on moonless nights. Dogs cowered, refusing to bay. Goldfinger miners reported hearing bells echoing through quartz tunnels, though no bell tower stood within 50 leagues. Lord Farman of Faircastle fortified his port, fearing cultists. The small council convened at once. "We cut off the serpent's head," Tyrion argued, "but its nerves still twitch." Marwyn shook head. "This reeks of imitation. The original power drowned, but fervor festers." He traced the sigil on parchment. Fanatics filling a void left by myth. Bran studied the map's western rim. If they gather near the crag in Fair Isle, they mean to snare trade before ships reach us, starve the capital of grain, ignite panic from within. Brienne proposed swift military response. She could muster 500 river knights, ride hard to the coast, stamp out nests before they multiplied. But Sam worried contagion of fear would spread faster than riders. Each report breeds exaggeration. Panic will outrun steel. Lindevan. Bran understood. Stories, like doors, could admit hope or horror. The only antidote was truth given first and loudest. "I will go," Bran said. Tyrion nearly swallowed his quill. "Forgive me, Majesty, but coastal raiders and door cultists are no place for a king who cannot lift a sword, even with a giant shield." Bran's eyes met his. "I need not lift a sword. I must lift testimony. Our people believe what they see. Let them see their king unafraid, and let them see the door that cannot be forced." He nodded toward Hodor. Brienne accepted at once, though her gaze flicked to Hodor. Unspoken calculation of logistics. Sam bit his lip, then ventured, "If the cult replicates the sigil, perhaps they covet artifacts. Better we carry none." Marwyn agreed. Dark Sister would remain entombed. Yet Bran insisted on bringing the fragment of black scale, sealed in dragonglass, to compare with any recovered. Preparations moved fast. A column of 200 mounted knights, 40 crossbowmen, and a dozen scribes for witness assembled under Brienne. Bran would ride a reinforced wagon. Hodor insisted on marching beside, leading the spare destrier by reins. Tyrion sealed supplies, a wagon of grain to gift stricken hamlets, barrels of fresh water, crates of chapbooks for children, and a folding ramp for Bran's chair at inns. Dawn departure drew crowds. Small folk bowed as the column clattered across cobbles. Million orphans waved from orphanage balcony, chirping farewell. Bran raised a gloved hand, heart buoyed by their shining faces. He glimpsed flicker of fear, too, their remembered wave of drowned cultists. He smiled broader, resolved to return with peace as cargo. They rode west along River Road, winter wind scouring hedges into ghostly silhouettes. Bran traced faint frost on wagon boards, thinking of Winterfell's Godswood where frost once glittered perpetually. He felt more at home here than in King's Landing's mild winters. Cold smelled like truth. Hodor trudged beside wheel tracks, breath pluming like forge smoke. When midday sun broke through high cloud, knights doffed helms, steam rising from hair. Yet Hodor seemed tireless, pace steady as water clock. On fifth night, they camped near Riverrun's rebuilt western watchtower. Lord Blackwood hosted a feast, venison stew, blackberry wine, and recited ballad of Hodor's harbor chain. Bran noted how quickly legend traveled and how sturdy it became in retelling. Chain links grew monstrous, thunder broke sky, the giant wove steel like thread. Hodor listened, politely embarrassed. But Bran saw a shy satisfaction glimmer. At dawn they pressed southwest, cutting across rolling downs. 3 hamlets lay ahead: Ford Hollow, Crestbank, and Lambstead, each last known to share grazing rights. The column found Ford Hollow eerily silent. Doors ajar, meals half-eaten on tables, livestock milling unshepherded. No bodies. Brienne dispatched scouts. They found a trail of bare footprints leading to Riverbend where half-moon indentations dotted sand. Bran felt shiver. Hodor gripped cudgel tighter. At Crestbank they discovered first blood. Sheep carcasses flayed into spiral patterns, entrails arranged like petals. A slate slab bore chalked inscription in smudged common tongue. Kaidi father, below calls. Bran dismounted wagon. Hodor lifted him into chair. They inspected scene. Sam noted lack of seagull scavenging. Strange inland. On intuition, Bran withdrew dragonglass orb containing scale. When he removed lid, scale trembled faintly, pulling toward spiral arrangement. Bran quickly resealed. Draw counter sigil, Marwyn advised. He sprinkled sand laced with iron filings into disrupt patterns. Hodor helped, sweeping arm wide to scatter filings. Wind rustled through orchard, uneasy hush lifting as spiral broke. Night approached as they entered Lambstead, torches probing gloom. At Village Square, they found survivors. A dozen farmers huddled around altar pyre. They jumped, startled by torchlight, until they saw crest of direwolf on Bran's cloak. Tears carved streaks down soot-smeared cheeks. Elderly woman stepped forward, voice cracked. We followed them. They walked like sleepwalkers. Down to Sea Cliffs. Then bells rang, real bells, we heard them. And half our folks stepped out onto nothing. Fell, she sobbed. Black water swallowed. Bran's chair rolled closer. Show me the cliffs. Despite Brienne's concern, Bran insisted. They traveled by moonlight, cautious. Cliffs stood sheer, slate gleaming under starlight. Far below waves gnawed rock teeth. Bran listened. Wind whistled, gulls cried. No bells. Yet in his bones, he sensed echo of something. Hodor sensed too, his brow furrowed. Teams explored cave mouths accessible at low tide. Within one they found crude altar, driftwood bound by kelp, topped with goat skulls. Coral knives ringed its base, each pommel bore 3 slashes scorched into bone. Among them lay wax tablets engraved with passages. When violet lights align, when empty door will open where water meets sky. And the nighter, dumpstick horsel. A bring the dreamer's remains. ACO the father below may rise. Marwyn deciphered other scratches, an approximate date. The solstice passed. Too late. The ritual had attempted to mimic the tower door, but without relics. The opening faltered, claiming sleepers yet not summoning entity. Bran exhaled shakily. Imitation indeed. He ordered altars burned, knives sealed in iron caskets. Survivors received grain. Scribes recorded testimony. Still, Bran gauged weight. Fear would linger. He must replace it with shelter. Gotcha. At Casterly Rock, Tyrion's sister's children, now Lady Jenna and Sir Davin's wards, hosted Bran's cortege. They pledged cooperation, rooting out cult pockets. The western coast would not stand alone. Bran addressed throngs in Tower Courtyard, describing the harbor battle frankly, then emphasizing resilience. Doors can hold, but they also open to those who choose light. He held up a chapbook copy of Pi the Gentle Giant and the Seabelske. Children cheered. He gifted 20 crates for schoolrooms. That night, after feasting on roast squab and autumn pears, Bran wheeled onto parapets nested into the cliff face. The sunset painted Lannisport's bay red gold. Hodor leaned over railing, scanning water. Bran followed his gaze. Nothing stirred but fishing cobs. Gulls shrieking for offal. He felt tension relax in Hodor's frame. "Safe," the giant whispered. Bran nodded. Across 3 more weeks, they toured hamlets, dousing cult embers. Word of King's arrival preceded them. Most zealots melted away. At Faircastle Garrison detected a band chanting near Lighthouse. Knights surrounded them, but the zealots slit their own throats, falling into surf. Bran refused to view the bodies. He'd smelled enough death. He focused on the living, established a watch funded by Crown, combining fishermen and mounted scouts. He left each port with grain, chapbooks, and promise of patrol galleys soon. Ain't she? By the time the column returned to King's Landing, earliest crocus tips pierced snow-dusted loam. Sea air hinted brine instead of decay. The capital received them with jubilation. Banners of wolf and rose hung from balconies. Bakers shaped cookies into Hodor's broad grin. Even sullen journeymen smirked. Bran addressed cheering assembly from Red Keep's balcony. "We faced not only sea monsters and false prophets," he said, voice carrying on surety learned from wind-honed parapet talks. "We faced ideas that prey on fear. We answered with hands clasping, doors held against hate, and doors opened to trade." He gestured to harbor where Myrish galleys patrolled alongside Crown galleys. "But our greatest stronghold remains the bond we share." He turned toward Hodor, standing behind. One heart, the size of a giant, beating for us all. Crowd roared. Bran's eyes stung, he bowed his head. Aye. Months slipped forward. Years would retell the Lantern Tide and the Western March. Children who once huddled hungry now learned letters in orphanage sunlit rooms, one of which Hodor used Sundays to teach them the language of doors. Thumps for numbers, taps for yes-no. He rarely spoke full words publicly, but in that classroom he surprised Millie by reciting entire nursery rhyme. Broken rhythm, yet every word intact. Children clapped, and Hodor flushed ruddy. Bran, from threshold, blinked back tears. He realized then that they had not merely ending a threat, but begun a reweaving of things sundered long before either was born. The door once ripped open in that underground cave, forcing Hodor into eternal echo, had not been patched by magic alone but by living. Each act of mercy, each loaf shared, each lantern floated. Such threads mend fates quietly but sturdily. One twilight much later, after council dismissed, Bran wheeled through corridors whose stones glowed amber by torch. He found Hodor on garden balcony, feeding the nearly full-grown pigeon bits of barley. Snowflakes drifted, melting on feathers. Hodor looked up, eyes reflecting bright torch halos. Bran took a long breath. "I had dream again," he confided. "A shore of black sand, yes, but this time no bell tower. Only footprints leading away, inland. The waves were quiet. They've no Hodor considered, then spoke. Slow but sure. "Door close." Another small sentence, 4 syllables, monumental. Bran felt emotion slam through him, like tide against quay. He clasped Hodor's wrist. "Yes," he said. Closed. They stood together, king and guardian, watching as pigeons wheeled above rose bushes crusted with frost, as lanterns flickered along ramparts, as night folded the city in protective arms. Somewhere deep beneath the Septi ruins, a sword and a set of straps slept inside fused rock, mute testimony to storms survived. Above, constellations shimmered, unchanged yet freshly named by orphans who pressed faces to dormer panes and made stories of their own. The quiet stretched long, wrapping them like furs. Bran heard distant laughter in the bailey where knights taught squires footwork. smelled bread cooling in bakehouse vents, sensed the pulse of 10,000 dreams behind shuttered windows. He imagined all those minds as doors, each unique shape, awaiting gentle hands to knock, to open, to share warmth. Pretty, Hodor murmured finally, gazing at snow-dusted garden. Bran followed his eyes to a single ghost wind blossom still alive under glass cloche, its petals trembling as if breathing. He smiled. Yes, he agreed, voice husky. Very pretty. And the city, bruised but shining, exhaled in unison as winter's chill settled into something softer than fear. A hush poised not for horror, but for song. The kind of hush that precedes the first line of a story children will tell their grandchildren. How a gentle giant and a quiet king taught a broken world that the strongest doors are not the ones slammed shut against darkness, but the ones kept open for light to enter, again and again, until no night is too long to outlast the dawn. Engel, HGS, Akia, PGSQL. A hush had settled over the winter gardens, white light slanting through arched latticework like the quiet bars of a frozen harp. Hoarfrost glazed every thornless cane, each leaf rimmed in silver so thin it seemed woven from moonlight. Bran used to dread the cold, for it bit his skin and stiffened his joints in ways that made him feel more prisoner than king. But on this winter morning, he felt a curious ease, as if the world itself drew a steady, measured breath. He rolled along the flagstones, flanked by Hodor, whose footfalls drummed softly under the hush, and by Maester Samwell Tarly, quill poised above a leather-bound diary, so swollen with pages, it might well have been two books stitched into one. You see, Sam was saying, once the root grafts the Ghostwind Rose ought to survive even a hard frost. The Reachmaesters claimed the same technique revived the Goldheart vineyards after the long winter. We shan't need greenhouse glass at all, come next season. His cheeks colored with enthusiasm as he spoke. Bran's fingers traced the rim of his chair's armrests. A rose without glass, he mused. No more barrier between blossom and sky. He stopped beside a raised bed still shielded by waxed cloth. Do you think the soil remembers the cruelty of past winters? Sam smiled. A soft, bookish tilt of his lips. Soil forgives, your grace. It has no memory for malice, only for growth. Now, Hodor bent to peer at a frost-nipped sprig, humming his low, contented hum. Grow, he murmured, fourth new word now, delivered like a benediction. Sam scribbled it down with a delighted flourish, as if noting a rare bird's call. Bran's eyes lifted to the curtain wall, where mason's scaffolds still clung like ribcages to the stone. A cluster of apprentices hammered new brackets for lantern sconces. Amid the clang, Bran noticed the absence of something. For weeks now, no bells other than those steeple bells at noon, no phantom chimes on night wind. He wondered if peace made a sound, or if it was only the lack of dissonance that people called peace. Maester, Bran said, write to the orchards outside Highgarden. Ask for saplings, plum, cherry, pear. We'll plant them in the orphanage grounds come spring. Sam nodded, ink blotting slightly when the cold stiffened his hand. Children will be thrilled, your grace. A tree that feeds you teaches patience. And patience roots loyalty, Bran answered, then gestured toward Hodor, who was gently brushing frost crystals off the leaves with fingers thick as paving stones. See how even a giant can handle something delicate when he understands its worth. A horn sounded beyond the gatehouse. 3 sharp blasts, the agreed signal for messenger from the Western Watch. Bran exhaled, half expecting bad tidings, for no horn had sounded thrice since their return. Hodor's head lifted, eyes narrowing, not from threat but readiness. Together, they moved toward the breezeway where the garden met the long hall, Sam trailing with pages fluttering. The guard captain appeared, saluted briskly, cloak shedding powdery snow. Raven from Castle Black, your grace. He handed a slim cylinder. Bran took it, unrolling parchment that smelled of pitch and windburn. The letter was brief, penned in firm runic strokes by the new Lord Commander, a wildling woman named Tala Crowkiller, chosen for her shrewd sense and relentless watchfulness. Her words told of a thin figure glimpsed near the far side of the wall's ruins. Except there was no wall, not anymore. Only scattered towers. The sentry claimed the figure wore antlers of ice, skin the blue of twilight buried beneath an ocean. When torches approached, it evaporated like breath. 3 nights later, a white elk stood where the figure had been, bleeding from a shoulder puncture shaped like trident tines. Tala's men followed crimson tracks to the haunted forest, losing them near an old weirwood stump. She asked if the king's dreams had felt any ripples of such anomaly. Bran's fingers tightened. Cold flared through him, not icy bite, but the chill of recognition. Antlers of ice. Blue skin. Dreams had indeed returned in flickers. A silent silhouette under aurora skies. Antlers glimmering with frost. Ravens landing on its shoulders like living adornments. He folded the letter. Sam fidgeted. "Another door," he whispered. Bran shook his head slowly. "A shadow, not a door." Then louder, "Send reply, continue watch, leave offerings of salt and fire nightly for 21 nights. Tell them to burn no trees." The guard saluted again and hurried to the ravenry. Hodor's gaze never left Bran. "Safe?" he asked, voice as low as a plucked gut string. Bran touched his guard's arm. "Safe for now." But truth fluttered like a nervous lark inside his chest. The north whispered still. The land never fully healed. Eki. Inwai Shonta, Uniwestian. Tyrion found Bran soon after dusk, pacing the solar with a goblet of mulled wine and a face drawn like a lute string wound too tight. "I'll wager half the hand's purse that letter brought grim tidings," he said without preamble. "Your maester looked like a child who'd spilled ink on his father's only map." Bran wheeled to the hearth. Flames threw long tongues of gold against flagged floor. "An omen in the north," he admitted. Tyrion gulped wine. "Of course it is. Always the north. One might think the south were immune to omens if it weren't for princes plotting and—" He stopped, noting Bran's stillness. "All right," he conceded. "More detail, less cynicism." Bran shared the letter's contents. Tyrion listened, brow furrowing. A white elk bleeding? Some free folk ritual perhaps. The report came from Gorn's spearwife, one of Tala's keenest eyes. "She'd no difference between hunting spoil and spectral vision," Bran replied. Tyrion sighed. "We cannot dispatch half the Crownland host every time a ghost deer wanders the ruins." "I'll send ravens first," Bran assured. "But if shapes appear again, I may need to go north." Tyrion's mouth opened, closed, then he drained his goblet. "Well, I was just getting accustomed to mornings without portents." "Very well. At least take the giant," he added, in softer tone. "The people sleep soundly because they trust you. Do not let them wake to rumors of your death miles beyond their grasp." Then, Bran's smile was faint. "No one's truly beyond grasp of story, Lord Tyrion. My life is woven in theirs." "Yes, but those stories spend my coin on funerals," Tyrion retorted, though the twinkle in his mismatched eyes belied his menace. He topped his wine with a splash of brandy and left muttering about preparing contingency plans. Hodor entered then, stooping under lintel. Snow clung to his cloak hem. When he saw Bran studying embers, he crossed, knelt, and presented a carved figurine. A tiny wolf curled around a rose. Rough, unfinished, but unmistakably his work. "Gift," Hodor said, voice gentle. Bran accepted, fingers tracing uneven grooves. "It's beautiful." The wood smelled of pine and sap. Bran tucked it into a pouch by his hip. "When the north calls," he said, "you'll stand at my side." Hodor nodded without hesitation. Bran leaned into him, finding comfort in the giant's warm shadow. Aye. Preparations for spring meant carpenters everywhere, gulping down nails and beams like forests scything locusts. Yet Bran and Hodor moved within this thrum as quiet islands. They visited the orphanage each sunset, where Millie and 24 children practiced the knock-and-tap language. They called it door speech. On a windy evening, Bran found them playing a game he did not recognize. One child tapped code telling the tale of Ghostwind Rose. Others interpreted with dramatic gestures. Hodor clapped so wildly the rafters quivered, dust sifting down like sugar. Bran knelt, his legs always numb but still able to fold with help from Hodor, and asked each child their dream. One wished to become a baker, another a mariner, another the first girl in the city watch. Bran promised them mentors. Later, in corridor glow, Millie tugged his cloak. "Sometimes I hear bells," she whispered, eyes wide. "In dreams. They're far away, muffled, but I know they're there." Bran's heart skipped. "What do you do when you hear them?" She considered. "I open the shutters, let other sounds in. Then they fade." Bran smiled. "Keep doing that. Bells fear fresh air." He pressed a blue pearl into her palm, gift from Myra's chest. "A window stone," he said, "to remind you?" She hugged him fiercely. "Ka." Spring thaw arrived like a sigh, loosening ice from eaves, sending rivulets through gutters where sparrows dunked themselves like children in bath. The orchards outside city walls shimmered with tentative buds. Bran Hodor oversaw planting, rows of pear saplings whose roots had been wrapped in damp straw all winter, now found new homes. The orphanage children helped shovel soil, laughing. Bran's arms were too weak for spades, but he guided hands, corrected angles, told stories of Winterfell forests. Hodor carried buckets of water, pouring each as delicately as if watering baby rabbits. When planting finished, Bran wheeled back, mud splattered on his boots, heart full. The realm, for that span, felt unshadowed, but letters soon clattered on Solar Desk. News of a drought forming across the Red Mountains, Dornish wells deeper by the week. A merchant caravan vanished on Roserade, wagons found with sigils painted over by slashes. Another raven from Castle Black. The figure with ice antlers had not reappeared, but a corpse of a snowy owl landed on rampart frozen solid, despite warm sun, its eyes fused by frost. Bran realized equilibrium could tilt with just a breath. It was time. He convened a small council. Tyrion, Brienne, Sam, Maester Dornios, and Marwyn joining remote via crystal lens. An invention dredged from the depths of Old Town vaults, allowing voice to travel along fine copper wires like watered down reeds. "I will ride north," Bran announced. "Spring's thaw opens the King's Road. We'll take a light escort, no banners to invite spectacle." He looked to Tyrion. "The Hand will rule in my absence under sealed orders." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "And if you vanish into some weirwood dream?" Bran's answer was simple. "Then rule without me, but I won't vanish." He reached into his pouch, placing the wolf and rose carving before Tyrion. "Keep watch over this. If it cracks, you'll know I'm in peril." It was nonsense. Superstition. But Bran saw comfort flicker in Tyrion's wary gaze. Symbols mattered. Brienne volunteered to lead escort. Sam insisted on coming for record. His writings now comprised 7 volumes entitled Caith the Reign of the Dor Wolf. Maester Dorneos chose 2 acolytes for wound care. Hodor hefted his cudgel once, answer plain. They departed before dawn, slipping beyond walls while the city slumbered under mist. The King's Road's winter ruts hardened to ridges, jarring Bran's chair inside the wagon. Hodor walked, cloak flaring, his silhouette startling deer. Sam rode muleback, nose buried in rumpled scroll. Brienne ranged ahead in plate-painted sky blue to melt under forest shade. Long miles passed. At each hearth they encountered, farmers shared rumors. Silver-eyed crows perched on roof trees, howling like wolves. Frost rings appearing on barley fields. Cold circles where nothing grew. Bran listened, asked calm questions. Left gifts of seed or coin. He trained mind to sift omen from echo. At the neck, they boarded a flat-bottom ferry across bog. Reeds hissed secrets. Marsh lights winked. A shaggy figure appeared on bank. Howland Reed, gray-bearded, spear in hand. He hailed them, guided ferry to Still Cove. Mira stepped out behind him, eyes alive. When she saw Bran, her shoulders trembled, and she clasped his hand, long tears unshed. "Something stirs under the mere," she said. "Fish vanish. Water tastes of iron." Howland set a jar atop Bran's lap. Inside, a shard of shell the color of moon-pale jade, rim scalloped, but edges sharp as razors. Caught in my net, he explained. It hummed, then stilled. Bran sensed faint vibrations still, like distant thunder. They stayed night in Crannog Keep of woven willow. Mira spoke of dreamwalkers glimpsing shapes that dripped water but left no footprints. Howland brewed marsh tea, claiming it masked fear. Hodor drank 3 cups yet remained sober. The brew seemed to calm him. Next dawn, Bran parted from the reeds with a promise to send maesters of natural history. The shard he stowed in dragonglass box besides black scale. Both vibrated faintly in proximity, as if conversing. Kanande, Omri Jehe. Northward they trudged until the gray water mist, ceded to the pines of the Wolf's Wood. At last, Winterfell loomed, banners snapping. Bran's heart panned at sight of shattered towers rebuilt, new timbers shining where war once burned. The castle smelled of wood smoke and fresh bread, memories thick as snowdrifts. Sansa greeted them in the great hall, queen in the north to her people, hair crowned with a simple circlet shaped like dire wolf claws. Her hug crushed Bran's ribs gently. She welcomed Hodor with tears, pressing her forehead to his chest. "You saved him, sweet giant," she whispered. Hodor whispered, "Hum," and the hall warmed. In council chambers, Bran laid shards and scale on oaken table. Sansa listened, lips pressed. Her maester, a solemn woman named Rowena, confirmed seeing frost flowers blooming nightly on cryptstones. Jon was still across the sea, seeking passage for wildling tribes who refused southern life. Bran's presence comforted Sansa. She admitted to dreams of a white hart wandering hallways, antlers dripping red. That night, Bran wheeled to the God's Wood. The heart tree's face bled sap, red lines like tears. Stars glittered through bare branches. Snow, light as ash, fell. Hodor stood sentinel at gate. Bran placed hand upon the weirwood, felt pulse of roots deep, far. Against eyelids bloomed a vision. The antlered figure, closer now. Its face was neither man nor beast, an empty mask of ice, features shifting. Within its chest flickered something green, like drowned wildfire. Ravens wheeled overhead, 9 and 9 more. White feathers edged black. The figure turned, regarding Bran across distance immeasurable, and then extended one hand. Inside its palm lay Dark Sister, blade blacker than void. Chains rattled from sky, and bells tolled, but faint, as though underwater. Bran's breath hitched. He pulled away, gasping. Hodor was at his side instantly, huge hand, steadying. Bran managed. Saw it. Hodor did not ask what. He understood. Dawn came pale. Bran summoned travel group. "We press beyond the ruins," he said. Sansa argued it foolish, but Bran insisted. Brienne agreed. Sam's knees knocked, but he tightened cloak. They marched through last tattered remains of wall towers, through drifting sheets of snow that glowed faint blue after dusk. 2 nights north of Eastwatch, they found the White Elk, still living, wounds sealed by frost. It stepped from bramble into moonlight, eyes dark pools within pale face. Bran signaled halt. The elk regarded them, then knelt, slowly folding to knees as though submitting. From its shoulder, Bran plucked a fragment of ice shaped like arrowhead. The elk rose, shook fur, and trotted away, ghost through pines. The arrowhead hummed. Bran placed it with jade shell and scale. All 3 resonated, and faint lines of light arced between them like webs. Sam gasped. Marwyn's voice crackled through pendant-sending crystal. "Convergence of relics. Be wary." The forest quieted. Snow fell heavier. Then bells rang. Single, throbbing note, rippling through marrow. Hodor stepped before Bran, cudgel lifted. Trees parted. The antlered figure approached, towering even taller than Hodor. Its antlers glistened starlight. Its eyes were empty cavities swirling with mist. Bran felt Weirwood's pulse within his chest. He rolled forward despite Brienne's protest. The giant specter halted an arm's reach away. Bran held up the dragonglass box. "These belong to your song," he said, "but you cannot have the door." The figure tilted head. Wind hissed through antlers, shaping words none heard but all felt. "Eagsing, or drown." Dull bells tolled again. Snow exploded upward as if struck from beneath. The ground cracked, revealing mirrors of ice. Hodor slammed cudgel into earth, and fractures ceased, stabilized by his sheer will. Bran met hollow gaze. "I will sing," he answered. He began reciting every word of old tongue he had gleaned from children of forest memories. Fragmentary, rough, but filled with intent. A lullaby about sun-thawing winter lakes, about sap climbing from root to bud. The wind changed, carrying notes. Spectre's antlers dripped water, ice turning to dew. It shrank slightly. Bran opened box, let shard, scale, arrowhead float. They fused midair, whirled of green and black and moon jade forming a single crystal bud. Bran's voice wove around it. The crystal sprouted tendrils of light that wrapped figure's chest. Bells quieted. The giant shape bowed, antlers shedding in fragments like petals. Where it stood now crouched a young girl. Skin pale blue, hair silver white, eyes seashell gray. She cradled a broken shard of bone and wept without sound. Bran wheeled closer. "What is your name?" Lips parted. Voice faint as snowfall. "Bellara." Sam recorded every breath. Brienne lowered sword. Hodor knelt beside the girl, offered broad palm. She looked up, fear melting into awe, and placed broken bone upon his palm. It disintegrated in glow, merging with crystal bud that hovered, pulsing. The snow ceased. Stars glared brighter. Bellara gazed around, dazed. "I was a dream someone else dreamt," she whispered. Bran understood her captivity within myth. He gestured gently. "Dream a new dream, Bellara." She closed eyes. The crystal bud brightened, then drifted down, rooting into earth. A sapling sprouted instantly, bark pale, leaves shaped like bells, edges luminous. Bellara stepped back, a smile trembling. Her antlers were gone, replaced by a circlet of woven frost flowers that did not melt. Door closed, she murmured. Bran nodded. Door closed. Hodor echoed. The forest exhaled, wind tossing snow like confetti. Sam sobbed openly, overwhelmed. Brienne sheathed sword, whispering a prayer. Bran laid hand on new sapling. Warmth pulsed beneath bark. It was a border tree, warden between worlds. Bellara faded, as though dissolving into soft motes. Gone without pain. The sapling shimmered once, then stilled. Bran turned to his friends, exhaustion sinking deep yet laced with profound calm. "We've planted hope," he said. Hodor lifted him into arms, cradling gently. They trekked back south, through night, lit by starlight, so brilliant even shadows glowed silver. By the time they saw Winterfell's walls again, dawn's first blush colored east. Sansa stood on rampart, cloak snapping. She saw the sapling's single bell leaf Bran carried, a token, and her eyes filled with tears. Daywaychar. Months melted. The sapling thrived within Winterfell's godswood. Each leaf chimed soft in breeze. A music too faint for fear. Bellara never reappeared. Jade shell, arrowhead, scale no longer vibrated. They rested inert in museum case, labeled relics of requited storms. Storytellers debated meaning, but Bran knew. Every relic now served life, not death. Back in King's Landing, Bran championed new laws. Winter grain reserves, free hearth leagues patrolling roads, libraries where any child could read. The realm steadied, not in sudden flourish, but in firm heartbeat. Lantern Tide became annual feast. Bells rung joyfully from rebuilt sept. Human bells, unenchanted, ringing because hands pulled ropes. And in palace gardens, those pear trees blossomed white, each spring, heavy fruit by summer. Children climbed branches, laughter rattling petals like gentle rain. Hodor sat beneath, carving more wolves and roses, sometimes humming, sometimes speaking in sentences now. "Trees need stories," he would say, "so they know why to bloom." Bran often answered, "And stories need trees, to remember roots." They'd laugh. On an evening many years hence, two teenagers dashed through orchard, one dark-haired girl brandishing stick like sword, one red-haired boy with book tucked under arm. They halted upon seeing Bran and Hodor. The girl bowed, grinning fearless. "Your Grace, Sir Hodor, we found a nest of doves atop the library roof. May we move them to the garden so cats can't reach?" Bran's eyes crinkled. "Yes. Doors are safest when left ajar for doves." Hodor rose, ruffling both kids' hair, and followed them. Bran remained beneath heavy boughs. Sunset painted fruit golden. He inhaled the mingling scents of pear and rose and frost memory. Somewhere distant, real bells rang. Curfew lifted, gatehouse opened for evening market. Their notes were imperfect, sometimes flat, sometimes sharp. Bran cherished that imperfection, for perfection was a closed door. Only flaws let light leak through. He closed his eyes, listening until footsteps returned. Hodor's wait, children scamper. They'd built a cradle of twigs and lined it with ghost grass. The doves nestled, serene. Bran extended hands. The boy placed the cradle in his lap. Bran tilted head, marveling at fragile life. He whispered thanks. Hodor touched his shoulder. "Pretty sound," he said. Bran agreed. The cooing, orchard breeze, distant bells, each a note in symphony of continuing. No looming tower, no spectral chime. Just the common, wondrous music of a kingdom alive. As twilight deepened, Bran felt the hush return. But this hush no longer presaged terror. It was the pause before a lullaby. A quiet saturated with promise that when doors closed at night, they closed to keep hearth warmth in, not to shut fear out. He smiled into the gathering dark. Hodor's silhouette enclosed him like a steadfast hill, and the world, still bruised, kept breathing its slow, resilient breath. K. Ikmal. PGSQL. Morning haze drifted like pale cloth across the rooftops of King's Landing, catching on chimney pots and the high-arched buttresses of Maegor's holdfast before unraveling into thin ribbons that vanished in golden sun. The day opened gently. Gulls wheeled above the black water with none of their usual aggressive cries, simply gliding on the updrafts as though lulled by the hush that now characterized the city at dawn. Here and there the sound of wooden carts rattling across cobbles struck the crisp air, but not with the frantic pace of the years of rebuilding. Rather, it was an unhurried cadence, a practical rhythmic acknowledgement that peace required work, but not haste. The capital had relearned patience, and that was the rarest victory of all. Bran woke in the dawnlight that spilled through his open windows. He had insisted on keeping them unshuttered even in late winter so that the first rays might warm him, reminding his limbs that life belonged to the living, even those whose legs no longer obeyed. The sheets were cool but not cold. A brazier glowed near the wall, burning charcoal scented with pine resin. As he lay quietly, the hush of the city touched him, soft, like a hand smoothing hair, and he held his breath a moment, listening for the faintest echo of bells that once haunted his dreams. None came. Instead, he heard the scuffle of tiny claws. The doves the children had rescued were fluttering in their cage near the hearth, adjusting to the dim presage of dawn. He smiled, turned his head, and saw Hodor seated on the rug beside the cage, massive back against the wall, knees drawn up like two white boulders beneath his plain wool robe. The giant had kept vigil, but sometime in the night he had surrendered to sleep. Now his nose tucked against one shoulder, and a strand of silver-touched hair lay across his brow. Bran waited, unwilling to disturb that peace. He watched the soft rise of Hodor's chest until a stray beam of sun crept across the floor and nudged the giant's eyelids. They fluttered, opened, found Bran's eyes, and brightened in recognition. Hodor straightened carefully, so as not to jostle the cage, and murmured, "Mornin'." The word was clumsy but unmistakable and full of gentle pride. Bran's heart swelled. Even after all these years, every new syllable felt like a sapling leaf uncurling. "Morning," Bran replied. "Did they keep you up?" Hodor shook his head and rose. The doves flapped once as if to greet him, then settled again. He checked the water dish, nodded approval, and crossed the stone floor to Bran's chair. With habitual care he eased Bran into the seat, tightening the leather straps across Bran's waist and thighs, testing the wheels with one push. Their unspoken ritual concluded, Bran touched Hodor's forearm in thanks, and Hodor answered with a soft grunt of contentment. Together they rolled from the royal apartments, leaving the gentle stir of wings and the fading smell of pine charcoal behind. The corridor outside was bright, sun-polished on fresh whitewash. The workmen had scraped away every last scorch mark from the siege years ago, but still Bran's eye could find the faintest ripples in stone where fire had kissed too fiercely. It reminded him of scars on flesh. Proof of pain, yes, but proof too that flesh had endured. They passed a new tapestry, woven only this winter, depicting the Ghostwind rose in full bloom, its petals forming a circle around the direwolf sigil. On the far edge of the pattern, a stylized door stood open, light spilling out across a shadowed floor. Bran slowed. "Do you see?" he asked quietly. Hodor gazed, brow creased. "Door," he confirmed. They studied the interplay of thread and dye until footfalls sounded behind. Tyrion Lannister approached, cloak trimmed in burgundy sable, eyes twinkling with customary wariness. "Up before the council again, your grace," he said, voice echoing in the long gallery. "If only all our noble lords rose as early, we might finish the day's arguments before supper." Bran leaned back. If lords argued less, they might wake more rested. Tyrion chuckled and fell into step beside the chair. His stride half as long as Hodor's, but twice as quick, compensation born of lifelong necessity. "Today's agenda," he said briskly, taking a folded parchment from his belt, "is mercifully slim. An audience with the Lysine shipwrights, the matter of the Dorne drought relief caravans, and then, because I am clearly cursed, another petition from the Brotherhood of Alchemists, requesting a new charter. They promise no more experiments within city walls, only remote testing grounds. I remain skeptical. You know, show them the acres we set aside by the ruins of Valyrian Road," Bran said. "If they agree to build blast earthworks and pay for a company of stonemasons to oversee safety, let them have it." Tyrion blinked. "And when they blow themselves sky high?" Bran shrugged lightly. "There are worse monuments to folly. Stones can fall where men need examples." Tyrion laughed despite himself. "I'll draft the charter." He tucked the parchment away. "There's another summons," he added after a beat, voice lowering. "A rider from Old Town arrived before dawn. He seeks audience, urgent seal of the Hightower. Claims to bear news about the Northern Sapling." "None." Bran's breath caught. "He can join us after the Lyseni." Tyrion nodded, then broke off to brief the marshal at the council doors. Bran and Hodor entered the chamber, tall windows flung wide to sunlight, floor strewn with fresh rushes. The small council already assembled, Sam now rounder than ever but beaming with sleepy delight, Brienne in laced brigandine, Maester Dornos fussing over a vial of vinegar, and Lord Mikaros Chorus, come south permanently to manage Myrish trade. He bowed as Bran rolled to the head of the table. The others rose as protocol required, then sat. Discussions began. Dock fees, caravan escorts, merchant quotas. Bran listened, judged, clarified, smiled. Hodor stood immobile behind his chair, but his eyes roved calmly along the faces, like a shepherd measuring the content of a flock. When the Lyseni proposed a 30-year exclusive hold on galleon construction, Bran countered with 15, and an apprenticeship clause that would teach Westerosi shipwrights advanced hull joining. They grumbled but agreed. A fair compromise. Hodor rumbled once. Good. And the delegates jolted in mild amazement. Bran had to bite back a grin. Hours later, the Hightower rider was admitted. A lank, sunburned young man, cloak stained with full gallop sweat. He bowed, presented a sealed coffer. "For the king," he said in reedy voice. Bran gestured for Hodor to accept. The giant lifted the lid. Inside, cushioned on velvet, lay a single bell-shaped seed no larger than a thumbnail, opalescent white with veins of emerald swirling just beneath the shell. Bran leaned forward. "Where found?" "Beneath the sapling at Winterfell, your grace," the rider said, voice quavering. "Maester Rowena uncovered it whilst tending the roots. Archmaester Ebrose believes it must be studied at the Citadel, but Lady Sansa insisted I ride to you first." Bran closed eyes. The sapling had borne no fruit yet, none even predicted, A seed already, a promise of new growth elsewhere. Brienne noticed his stillness and whispered, "Are you well?" Bran opened his eyes. "Very well," he said. "Arrange escort for the seed to Old Town. Sam will accompany. But before it leaves the capital, it will rest in our Godswood one night." "Now," Sam brightened, "I'll guard it with my life." "So will I," Hodor said quietly. Heads turned. Surprise flickered across delegates' faces. Hodor rarely spoke in council. Bran merely nodded. "Away Shawan day." That night, the moon rose half shy behind drifting clouds. Bran, Hodor, Sam, and Brienne converged upon the small godswood that now flourished in the Red Keep's courtyard. An echo of Winterfell's, but younger. More temperate, rowan and ash intermingling with a single white weirwood whose carved face still looked unfinished. Its eye sockets shallow, its mouth a line of dawning speech. Bran rolled over soft grass, bleached silver beneath moonlight. He carried the velvet-lined box on his lap. The seed seemed to pulse faintly, as though tasting the night air. Sam set torches in sconces at four corners. Brienne planted herself at the archway, hand on hilt. Hodor crouched behind Bran, his huge hands cupping his knees. The silence felt heavier than any of them and more charged. Bran opened the box. Moonlight struck the seed. Tiny motes drifted upward like dust, but glowed green as wildfire. They spiraled into the air, forming a halo that circled the weirwood's unfinished face. Bran felt roots stir below, tiny filaments groping deeper. The weirwood's expression seemed to quiver. For the first time, the mouth opened the barest fraction, as if sculpted by unseen chisels. Then came a sound, no bells, no thunder, just a low chime like wind across crystal. The halo dissolved. The seed lay quiet again. Bran exhaled. Sam's voice trembled. It listened. It learned. Bran corrected softly. He closed the box. "Tomorrow you'll depart. Carry with gentlest hands. Tell the Citadel this seed is memory given shape. They must treat it as a guest, not a specimen." Sam promised fervently. The torches smoldered low. Shadows flickered. Brienne cleared throat. "Any sign, older magics?" Bran shook head. "No door opens tonight. Only a window, and only wide enough for breath." Hodor sighed contentedly. "Sleep," he said, as if advising the sapling. And perhaps advising Bran too. They left torches to burn out naturally, and withdrew to the keep. Over following days the city bustled with talk of the seed. Rumors flew faster than ravens. That it would sprout a forest of bells, that it cured frostbite, that it whispered secrets of the children of the forest when held to the ear. Merchants sought to purchase shavings for potions. Crooks plotted to steal it. But Sam rode west with 10 horse guards, and a sealed chest strapped across his saddle. Disappearance timed with decoy caravans so no footpad knew which way to chase. Bran tracked their progress via Raven. Each day a short line. All well. Seed safe. Meanwhile, Bran turned to another matter. The long-promised academy for Ravencraft, to be built on hills north of the capital where the old ruins of Maegor's fortifications stood. Tyrion drafted designs. Mikaros donated glass for suncatchers. Master Dornios insisted on thunder-resistant roosting towers. Hodor joined the laborers, carrying beams too heavy for 3 men, adjusting hoists, driving stakes. Children followed him, giggling, calling him Doormaster. He answered with patient smiles and carved small wooden bells to hand out when tasks were done. One afternoon, Bran rolled to the building site. Dust hung over cut stone blocks. Hammers rang. Hodor stood at edge of trench, surveying a newly laid foundation shaped like a crescent. When he spotted Bran, his face lit like dawn. He pointed at the curve. "Looks." He paused, searching for word. Bran waited. Hodor's brow furrowed. "Looks safe," he decided. Bran chuckled. "That's high praise from you." Masons laughed quietly, proud. Construction progressed. As westering sun bronzed scaffolding, Bran felt contentment bloom. Yet peace does not freeze. It moves like river water, sometimes deepening, sometimes swirling unexpected. "Okay," A fortnight later Sam's raven arrived Old Town safely. Archmaester Abe rose in awe. Seed hums at dawn. Will forward, detailed findings. Bran read the parchment twice, then folded it next to his heart. Tyrion, upon hearing, toasted the success with arbor red. Brienne permitted herself a rare grin. Only Hodor appeared restless. He paced more in evenings, and though he labored each day, he seemed to carry an invisible question. Bran noticed but waited until quiet hour near midnight, when they sat alone on balcony, overlooking the torchlit harbor. "What troubles you?" Bran asked gently. Hodor studied the water. "Seed," he said. "Gone." "It's not gone," Bran replied. "Only traveling. Like birds migrating." Hodor's shoulders slumped forward. "Door. Need both sides," he attempted. Bran contemplated. "You mean you guard one half? The other half is far away now." "Then..." Hodor nodded. Bran considered the subtle wisdom. "There are more guardians," he assured. "Sam guards there. You guard here. The door is safe." Hodor relaxed slightly. Bran reached to clasp his forearm. "We guard each other too." Hodor smiled. "Both sides." They fell into companionable silence. Abruptly Hodor tilted his head. "Music," he said. Bran listened. Distant notes of a lyre carried on sea breeze. Someone practicing scales aboard a moored Lycian merchant. The tones drifted. Gentle, imperfect. Hodor closed eyes, swayed slightly. Bran imagined chords weaving into night, sewing peace onto tapestry of dreams. In that moment he glimpsed a future. The academy towers finished. Doves cooing in courtyards. Children reciting names of stars without fear of omens. Kanal-K. Spring rolled to summer. The Ravencraft Academy opened with banners unfurling from parapets. Stylized doors, interior lit, wolves leaping through. Sam returned for dedication, cheeks sunburnt, bearing a wooden box carved with swirling runes. Within lay a small sprout grown from the seed, its stem pale, leaves shaped like little bells. The Citadel insisted it belonged in King's Landing to honor its origins. Bran accepted with reverence. Hodor cradled the pot like a holy relic. They planted it beside the original rose vines in the palace garden. The sprout responded, leaves trembling, emitting faint chiming when wind brushed them. Children gasped, convinced it sang. Brienne placed stone benches around so visitors could listen. Tyrion, ever skeptical, listened one dusk, and later swore the leaves sounded distinctly like tiny voices reciting shipping ledgers. "Possibly my own overtaxed conscience," he muttered. Days cooled. Early autumn festivals filled streets. Lantern-Tide now celebrated not just victory over sea phantoms, but the promise of doors held open for knowledge. The orphanage staged a play, retelling the Northern Quest. Millie, taller now, played Belara and danced in pale blue cloth beneath silver antlers fashioned of bent tin. Hodor sat front row, tears coursing when stage lights dimmed and tiny bells rang to mark the closing of the dream door. Later, Bran wheeled backstage to praise the actors. Millie flushed, bowing. "Sir Hodor made my antlers," she confessed, producing them. Bran admired the craftsmanship. Every tine smooth. He pictured Hodor hunched over scrap metal, tongue between teeth like a craftsman. Pride swelled. "Bandeji." "Nay." Seasons turned. Bran's hair silvered. Fine lines etched the corners of his eyes. Hodor's hair whitened, though his frame remained titanic. Children he had once taught grew into wardens, clerks, healers. Some joined the Ravencraft Academy. Others served in City Watch or traveled with Dorn caravans delivering water spells. One winter night, many years after the tower, long after the sapling, Bran called Hodor to the moonlit godswood. Snow carpeted the courtyard, muffling sound. The doorleaf tree stood taller than Bran by 3 heads, its bell leaves still chiming faintly despite frost. Bran reached out, touched trunk. "Do you remember the door we closed?" he whispered. Hodor stood behind, breathing white clouds. "Yes. I dreamed last night," Bran said. The door remained strong, but the hall beyond was, unfinished. Empty rooms awaiting tenants. Hodor frowned. Bran continued. We cannot fill those rooms alone. Time will. Children grow now. They will walk there. We must trust. He turned his chair, gazing up at Hodor. I am asking you to teach them beyond my teaching. When I sleep in the branches. Hodor's face folded like cloth, half creased with sorrow. Sleep? He understood Bran meant final sleep. Bran nodded slowly. Not soon, I hope. But seasons move. He looked toward the rose vines, now thick trunks winding along wall. Promise me, when the leaves of the bell tree drop, you'll tell them the story of how we held the door together. Hodor knelt, placed huge hand over Bran's. Promise. Then, surprising Bran, he added, I will open other doors too. For them. The sentence rolled with careful gravity. Bran's heart caught. Then the world is safe, he said quietly. Snowflakes drifted, sticking to Hodor's lashes. He smiled, blinking them away. They stayed until the torches burned low, listening to bell leaves sing over snow, until Bran's fingers numbed. Hodor lifted him back inside. Ka. Years later, Bran's body weakened. He spent afternoons in Tower Library, scribes recording his last observations about winds and dreams. When hand trembled too much for quill, he dictated. Hodor sat near, carving little doors from driftwood. Each was unique, some arched, some round, some cracked open to reveal a wolf or a rose. He left them on windowsills for children to find. The palace became dotted with miniature doorways, a ritual of blessing. One morning Bran did not wake at dawn. His breathing shallow, face serene, he lay as sunbeams painted lattice shadows on wall. Hodor sensed change and took Bran's hand. Bran's eyelids fluttered, he smiled. Bell leaves. Sing, he murmured. Hodor bent low. Bran's final breath was a whisper. Hold. And so Hodor did. He remained holding that small, cold hand long after warm fingers ceased grasping. Maesters came, whispered condolences, but Hodor stayed, head bowed. When at last they wrapped Bran in velvet and bore him to Godswood, Hodor walked behind, steps steady, eyes shining. They buried Bran at foot of Bell-leaf tree, as he had written in Lost Orders. Snow fell lightly. Children attended, each carrying a carved door. They laid them around the grave like petals. The bell leaves chimed, soft as dream lullaby. Tyrion older too, stood weeping openly, speaking of a king who ruled by listening. After the burial most drifted away, seeking warmth. Hodor remained. He knelt beside mound, pressed his palm to earth. Held, he whispered. Then he rose, towering silhouette against white sky. He turned to children huddled nearby, beckoned. They gathered. He sat cross-legged in snow and began to tell them about a boy who could fly in ravens, about a tower that screamed, about doors and bells and doves and roses. His words came slow but clear. The children leaned close, eyes wide. Snowflakes melted on their cheeks as if warmed from within. Tyrion watched from colonnade, heart aching yet comforted. Brienne stood with him, hand on his shoulder. Hell keep the story alive, she said. Tyrion nodded. And stories are stronger than stone. They turned away, leaving Hodor's deep voice rolling among trees. In seasons thereafter, Hodor became known as the doorkeeper. He tended academy roosts, guided young ravencrafters, and each lantern-tide he led procession, carrying a carved likeness of Bran on his shoulder, so the new children understood whose dream had become their dawn. He seldom slept in royal chambers, choosing instead a simple cot under Godswood branches. Some nights watchers swore they saw him conversing with two shapes, a white wolf and a boy of shadow who perched among bell leaves, but in morning footprints showed only Hodor's large tracks circling tree. As decades passed, Hodor's strength waned, but he endured beyond any maester's prediction. One summer twilight, now stooped, beard to waist, he sat under the bell tree, carving a door when heart slowed. He looked up at leaves shimmering bronze in sun. Breeze coaxed a chime. He smiled, set knife aside, closed eyes. Dawn found him still seated, face peaceful, wooden door resting finished on his lap. The children discovered him, cried, but tears soon mixed with wonder. The bell leaves chimed louder, and each chime drifted across city like luminous pollen, settling on rooftops and in markets, echoing in hearts that had never known the tower's terror, only its stories. The people lowered banners for mourning, yes, but they also hung tiny carved doors from eaves, from saddles, from fishers' nets. And in the Ravencraft Academy, the birds that morning sang a rhythm unmistakable. Hodor's once lonely syllable, now a song of thousands. They buried him beside Bran, under roots that curled like embracing arms. On the grave Sam set a marble tablet engraved simply, Hodor. The door held. The bell tree grew 2 new branches that year, each tipped with buds shaped like hearts. Kingdoms shifted, rulers came and went. Tales of battles faded into footnotes. Yet, in taverns across Westeros, one story endured, of a gentle giant and a boy king who believed strength lay in gentleness, doors in openness, and that peace could ring louder than any bell of doom. Parents taught their children knock and tap language so they could speak in hush without fear. Farmers left carved doors in fields to ward off blight. Sailors kept small bell leaves near helms to guide them home. And on still nights, when wind rustled orchards and doves cooed in roof-tree shadows, one might hear a subtle chime woven into breeze. Some swore it came from palace gardens, others from Winterfell sapling, others from deep forest where a heart tree with human face now smiled fully, carved in detail by time itself. Wherever the sound arose, it carried the same assurance. The door remained held, and always would, as long as humble hands, unafraid, reached across thresholds to lift another's lantern into the dark. For in the end, the greatest magic was not found in bells or antlers, or even in the sap that bled red as truth. It lived in the space between 2 souls choosing trust, and that magic, once set upon the world, required no kingly title to guard it, and no army to enforce it. It traveled in stories. It echoed in laughter. It blossomed in rose petals, defeating frost. It chimed in leaves shaped like bells. It whispered Hodor in the sleep of children, and it reminded every waking heart that the strongest door is not the one barred in fear, but the one forever held, the way a giant holds gently, the way a friend holds a hand, the way a story holds hope. Thus the hush of dawn over King's Landing became not the silence of dread, but the quiet promise of light poised to pour through countless tiny doors, each awaiting a knock, a welcome, and the simple word that began it all and ended it. For inside that word lay an entire history of courage, born of kindness, and a future safe in the steadfast echo. Hodor.